Hello, everybody. It's Susan, and I'm back to talk about this partial lunar eclipse that's coming up in Pisces in about 10 days' time from this video. And this is now the 18th of August, and we're going to see this eclipse on the 28th of August Universal Time at 4:12 in the morning. And what I'm looking at here is the eclipse itself, and of course, the different aspects that are being made to the eclipse. It's quite a highly aspected chart. What astrologers mean by that is that there are a number of different things that are happening at the same time. And this has been true for quite a lot of this summer, actually, or the middle of 2026, for those of you who are not in the Northern Hemisphere. And so I'm going to delineate all of that as much as I can. And then I'll go sign by sign, as I always do for these important events. And I just want to, before I begin, say thank you so much to all of you made your kind comments about my father's passing. We're all at peace. He's at peace. He died a happy, peaceful death, and that's the best thing that we could all hope for. And so I thank you again for your kind words and your loving comments. And it really does make me feel very, very warm and welcome in this community. I'm really so proud to be part of this community. So thank you very, very much. I love also the way you support each other in the comments. It's really beautiful to watch. So what we're looking at here with an eclipse, that is a lunar eclipse, is a full moon. A full moon is when the moon is opposite the sun and it's reflecting the light of the sun. Now, this is a particularly interesting full moon because it's the last one that's happening in Pisces of this cycle that we've had in the Pisces Virgo axis that actually technically began in September of 2024. And we had an eclipse then at a full moon in Pisces back then. And this is now the end of it. It's the last part of that story. And we will have in February next year, yes, I'm already talking about February. We're going to have a Virgo full moon, and that's going to be on the 20th of February at 2 degrees of Virgo, where the moon is actually opposite from this place, very close to where the sun is at this time. And that will be the end of this Pisces Virgo story for the next 18 years in terms of the North Node, South Node dynamic. So it is a North Node eclipse. And here we have the North Node recently moved out of Pisces. So that was on the 27th of August for the True Node. It's only going to be coming up on the 18th of August. So today, in fact, when I'm speaking to you, that the node will shift into Aquarius. So both True Node and Mean Node can be used. I tend to prefer the True Node. I just like to track where it is, and it does move back and forth. The Mean Node is always retrograde, and the True Node is sometimes direct, sometimes retrograde. And when I say sometimes, it's really like 5% of the time that it's actually direct, but it's interesting to track those different movements. And this gives a slightly more nuanced position than for the nodal axis. So this is the True Node. It moved from the 0 degree point of Pisces on the 27th of July into 2959 of Aquarius on that same day. And now we have this eclipse at 2950 of Aquarius. Now there's so many overlaps. You're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to be making all kinds of sidebars here. As I often do, I digress, and it's going to be a lot. So just bear with me, grab your cup of tea or whatever it is that you do when you're listening to these videos and enjoy the information. If you prefer, you can go to your timestamp and look at your particular sign. But there's a lot of information that I give in the introduction that is going to also add to what you're going to hear in your own time, in your own sign, rather. Now, one of the significant things is that this now is an eclipse that we've now got in two different signs. So there's an overlap here between Aquarius and Pisces. From the astronomical point of view, this is not a hybrid eclipse. A hybrid eclipse means it's an eclipse that goes from two sorts of eclipse, meaning it'll be like a solar eclipse with an annular effect, or it will be and then going into the diamond ring effect or something like that. But in the astrological world, sometimes we say that these are hybrid eclipses. So there is a bit of confusion around that. I tend to just not talk about it for that reason. So there's just an overlap here. We've got Aquarius where the North Node is, and we need to factor that in to the moon that's in Pisces. So the North Node is taking us in this new direction socially, globally, and collectively. And this is part of the bigger program, let's call it, of Pluto, which moved into Aquarius on the 23rd of March in 2023. And interestingly, during this eclipse, we have Pluto back on Altair. Now, it's not exactly conjoining Altair. You will have been hearing me talk about this for over a year and a half. In fact, it corresponds very much to this eclipse cycle that was in Pisces, with the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. But we're getting Pluto now back on Altair, and Pluto comes back to 3 degrees where it will station. And so that's really, really tightly conjoining Altair. Anything within 1 degree and up to 2.10, I think it is, with these brighter stars is significant in terms of conjunction. The closer we get into one, the more significant it is. So Pluto on Altair is one of those placements that describes a lot of issues around power, ambition, transformation. And of course, that's a significator anyway for Pluto. So it's adding to the North Node, which magnifies all of these things. And that intense drive for change, the intense drive for transformation, is a significator for Altair as well as Pluto. So I find this is a really just a very powerful eclipse in so many ways. Um, the Altair story, as well, as I said, it's an ongoing story that has been something I've pointed to in many videos going over the last year and a half. And another part of this story was picked up earlier this year, where the moon itself is now very tightly conjunct, again, within a degree, very significant, to Fomalhaut. And Fomalhaut is one of the 4 Persian royal stars, and the Persian meaning Iranian, which is even more significant in these days, keeping in mind that we owe a lot of our astrological and astronomical understanding to ancient Persia and places like that. And so this is one of the 4 gates of heaven that they used to consider extremely important. And it's associated with the Archangel Gabriel. And so that's a really powerful point in terms of spiritual power or spiritual development in terms of this conjunction with this full moon. And if we think of the moon itself as representing the mind, it's the body-mind complex. It's especially the mind in terms of the memory and emotions and the fluctuating patterns of the mind. And when we get to the closeness of Rahu, or the North Node, with the moon, it can be very significant around issues of anxiety. When I see that in a natal chart, I'm always looking for challenges that individuals have had with maternal figures, for example, and also emotional bonds, which were not easy. It doesn't mean that there's no love. This is a different story. It's about what has gone on in the dynamic between mother and child. Now, if we think about that collectively, we can see that there's another overlap here. There's an emotional bond that's creating anxiety, or our connection to the greater whole, which is represented by Pisces, the collection of unity, the all that is, if you like, spirit, whatever you want to call it, and the notion of the collective overall in terms of Aquarius and the social impact and the collective dynamic. These are challenged when there is an eclipse on the North Node between these signs. So it's a very powerful time to be reflecting on what the mind actually does and how it functions. And I will be saying repeatedly throughout this presentation, or throughout my video here, different things that I'm looking at in terms of our mental state and in terms of the conditioning around our minds. And this is something that will be maybe an opportunity for you to step back. So you'll notice I'm eclipsing myself again for this video. I find myself just not wanting to be out there at this particular time. I don't think it's directly linked to my father's passing. I think there's something bigger going on. I've been going through several years of it, again, another major spiritual shift, and I just frankly want to be left alone. But the way the world is going, I also feel like I have my 10 cents to offer. And so I do keep coming back and, pounding sand or whatever it is that I'm doing here. And so here, this is something I just wanted to indicate because I'm not showing up literally in the video, but it's also a way of me protecting my energy. I've done this in other videos before where I've talked about that and where I feel like I need a container for myself. And you might find that as well, that you can find yourself in a place where you feel more at ease and that you can create a kind of a space between you and what's happening so-called out there. And especially in terms of the internet, where there's such a lot of input. And here we come back to the mind. And if we think about the state of the mind, one of the things that we know nowadays is that we have been for a very, very long time, and here we could even astrologically ascribe this to Pluto in this very strong, again, sextile, ongoing, but very strong sextile with Neptune, both retrograde now in the third degree, 3 to 4 degrees here respectively of Aquarius and Aries. And that signature is about thought manipulation. It's about propaganda. It's about how people or the masses have been controlled using illusion, delusion, mind control through anything to do with entertainment, for example, music, um, beat patterns, rhythm patterns, rave music comes to mind, like German techno, this kind of stuff. These kinds of patterns disturb our thought process and can even actually numb the thinking process, which is the point. And if you come to your device and you look at how the devices are calling us in 16 different directions anytime we pick them up, this is fragmenting our mind, it's fragmenting our attention. It is a cause of anxiety. So even if you are otherwise quite capable of functioning in your life and managing things, there's a seed of anxiety that is planted in our current times just by the virtue of the fact that we're participating in this insane mental experiment. And I use that word advisedly. And so here what we have is this opportunity to look at the moon through the lens of Fomalhaut, which is, really strongly associated with this higher spirit. Fomalhaut is calling us to align with what is true. And I've spoken about this in many, many videos where the notion of what is true is not about facts, because those notions of facts and ideas and even the visual image of things and labeling different things is something completely made up by the mind. It's made up by humans. It's made up by a concept. And it is not what we're looking at in terms of absolute truth. So we have a relative truth in the teachings of the East, especially the Buddha, who elaborated the stories of the mind and the whole story of how to escape from the mind in probably the best way of any tradition. And the Buddha says this, there is this relative truth that we share, that we're living together. And we're saying, here you are now listening to this voice of this disembodied person and looking at this screen with all these colors on the screen. And that's your relative truth of this moment. And even if we look at the astrology chart, it's a relative truth that is a human paradigm that has been designed and is a kind of a representation of the sky. It's absolutely not the sky. And even people who say they're using, accurate astrology, we're still working from the realm of a human concept when we say that there's any such thing as this constellation and that constellation, which are called those things. Nature does not operate that way. It's the human mind that needs to categorize and break things down. So we can see that there's this relative truth, and beyond that is where peace of mind lies. And that's in the absolute truth, where we get to this place of no thought or of recognizing things just are, and we can be a part of that in this kind of flow of life, as opposed to trying to manage or micromanage or control life. And that's what the notion of the moon here with Fomalhaut is extremely powerful for that reason. Altair gives us a bit of a quality of that. It elevates our ambitions. It elevates our sense of what's possible for us as well. And that alone is quite interesting. It has been very much part of the last year and a half, I think, in terms of our collective experience, collective observation of what it is that we actually want in this world, the very, very large masses of the majority of populations around the world want peace. People just want to be left alone. They just want to live their lives, have their children, enjoy a good meal with their family, with their friends, just get on with things and not have this divisiveness that has come into the extreme and particularly strongly with the Western mind, it has to be said, not exclusively, but especially through the Western mind of the last 500 years. And this is coming to an end. So I'm going to again make another parenthesis here, a little tangent to just say some people are saying, I don't see things happening. I've warned against this in terms of these larger transits, these larger outer planet configurations, where the notion of these major, major transits, these slower outer moving, so outer planets, these slower moving outer planets, they're indicative of a really major but very slow change, but that is permanent. Once we move in this new direction, which by the way, we're well in, we are moving in a new direction that we are no longer going to go back from. Now, in some cases, there are people who are talking about this being about, awakening and higher consciousness and all this kind of thing. That's an inside job. That's only you that can deal with that. There's no astrology that would suggest now is the time to awaken to your spirit. It's going to be your karma, it's your nature, it's the grace of the guru, it's the grace of God that allows you to wake up. And when I say wake up, I'm not saying about becoming aware of how the world works on the political level. I'm talking about literally waking up to realize the absolute reality as opposed to the relative reality that I was just talking about. And so what we're looking at in this moment of time is a massive, massive shift. And if you're not sensing that, you're not paying attention to the news, and perhaps that's a good thing. But then at the very least, recognize that we're no longer in a world where the Western dynamic or the Western ideas of superiority and power apply. They just don't apply anymore. And I equate this to an abusive marriage that is ending, where the spouse realizes that after maybe even decades of being gaslit and abused, they wake up and they see their partner for the first time. And these last few years have been that. The world has woken up to a dynamic that has been so toxic, and literally putting people to sleep with distraction. And yet people are now awake and aware of those dynamics in such a way that the world has changed forever. Now, I attribute this to April. We can see that astrologically, and maybe on some other video I'll do a talk about that. But if you think back to April, where I'm looking at there is the first ceasefire, in fact, the first of 2026, because of course there was already the Israelis and the US already started attacking Iran in 2025, but the first ceasefire of 2026 after they initially attacked on the 28th of February, which was, of course, by the way, where Uranus was exactly squaring this point from Taurus, from the end degree of Taurus to the nodal axis here at 2950 of Aquarius Leo. That is where things started to change in a major, major way. And from April, the Americans had to back away from the attacks on Iran because it became very clear that they could not succeed using the old strategies that they had been using. Things had changed. The war games had changed. The playing field was no longer level, or certainly it was tipping away from favor of the West. And so here what we have is an ongoing situation of change that's accelerating through the middle months of 2026, that's taking us into a completely different realm of geopolitics, which will impact all of us. So even if you in your personal life are not noticing a particular change, it can be because your chart is not aligned with certain points at this particular time, or that things have not yet unfolded, and often the unfolding comes as the faster moving planets, for example, the moon or Mercury or Venus, will come along and trigger points that had been set up, let's say, in earlier configurations by the slower planets, and then things start to take shape. but it's all happening, whether or not you're noticing that in your personal life. And I also want to just again make a tangent here to say that sometimes the best things are just simply to not change and let things just be as they are. Take it as a blessing that nothing is critical, nothing's changing, nothing has you running around in circles. And take that as your moment where you can regroup and come back to yourself. And there again, I come back to the notion of this moon. And the moon is all about our process of emotional regulation and thinking, our memory, our anxiety, all those different things that are incredibly important to a healthy, functioning human life. Now, again, with the notion of Fomalhaut on the moon and pointing us to this higher truth, we're looking at the truth from the place on an individual level, from the place of what our soul is guiding us towards. It's not something that the ego wants. To recognize, where am I in this moment of my life and what do I want out of my life? And what does my life require of me? What does life, not my life, but just life itself, require of me as I'm here experiencing this life? Because so often we have been trained to reduce that down to a selfish, egoic sense of my little self as a separate being. Pisces doesn't allow that way of looking at things. Pisces is about the recognition of our totality, our unity. And we did have in May, most of May and the first week of June, we had the North Node here at this degree where the moon is. So you can go back to that point where perhaps there was something that you realized already in May, June, and something came to you or came into your awareness that is now going to be triggered by this lunation. And what we're looking at here is, again, not what you wish for as an egoic self, not what your mind is saying, I need this to be secure, I need this to be comfortable, but really what your heart is saying. And when I talk about the moon as representing the body mind, that's where we can introduce the concept of the heart as the heart center. And recognizing, for example, the sign of Cancer represents the emotional hearts, and Leo represents the physical heart as well as love and the expression of the heart, let's say. And here we have the moon ruling Cancer, where we find Mars at this time. And there is an applying trine between the moon and Mars. So there's something that we can take action on within 3 days or 4 days of this eclipse. I think it's by the 31st of August, maybe 30th to the 1st, 2nd of September. Mars is going to be on Sirius. And Sirius is another important star. It's the spiritual sister star of our planet, or rather our sun, or our solar light, our solar center. And we're going to have Mars coming up to that point. Now, interestingly, when I was mentioning earlier, around the time of the April changeover of power, Jupiter was on Sirius and it was squaring Saturn as it was going through the pattern of moving towards uh, hang on, what was it? Was squaring sorry, squaring the sun, not Saturn. Saturn didn't get that far. It was squaring the sun at that point in the middle of Aries. So from the middle of Aries to the middle of Cancer, Jupiter was on Sirius. Now we're going to have Mars coming through there. So again, from April, and another significator of things that are being triggered from earlier this year. This is an opportunity to take some kind of charge of what it is that you're doing. The moon rules this Mars. I'm going to speak more about this interaction here between the moon and Mars when we get back to Leo, when we're talking about Jupiter. But just for now, just to finish this notion of the soul and what I mean by the soul, the heart, the drive, the inner voice that you are possibly hearing or not hearing based on how anxious you are. When we're anxious and distracted or fearful, we don't get our inner guidance. We don't get our intuition loud and clear. The moon represents that inner guidance, the intuition, the feeling rather, the gut feeling of what it is that we know we need to do. And that can often be there's too much noise and not enough quiet time. So you might need, again, like I'm trying to do here, without completely dissolving and disappearing. I'm trying to just buy myself quiet time and quiet, being in retreat, as it were, from at least certain patterns in my life. And just finding that quiet space, finding that introspective quiet space is really, really vital right now. Because otherwise, the mind is going to be taken over by anxiety, by fear, and the distraction and the intensity of information and distraction that we are bombarded with regularly, whether we want it or not. Even if you don't use devices, if you go out in the world today, you're going to be hit by advertising, you're going to be hit by billboards, you're going to be hit by whether it's at a bus stop, some advertising there. You cannot avoid it now in our world unless you're really out in the sticks. And God bless you if you are, but then apparently you still also have Wi-Fi or some kind of a radio antenna. So we're never really that far from disruption in terms of our brain waves and in terms of how we're feeling and thinking. So we need to find that inner sanctuary, this place that we can find calm, this inner peace, so that we can then find our own inner guidance. And notice that our inner guidance is always and forever ethical. You will never be guided to do something unethical. You will not be guided, for example, to have an affair. You will not be guided to go and murder somebody. That will be an impulse. That will be an instinctive impulse, but it will not be coming from your higher self. And again, somebody mentioned in another video when I mentioned murder, yes, there are conditions where that's actually righteous and justified. I'm not going to go into that. You know what I mean, obviously. We're not here to kill each other. And when we look at the notion of the mind, again, representing our emotions, feelings, the memories of who we are and the visceral memory that is beyond the mind, beyond the thinking, and the internal engine, let's say, that is instinct. It's this moon that is being eclipsed right now. And that's why when we don't see the moon, there is a moment of anxiety. And it's just in the same way as we don't see the sun, there's a moment of awe and anxiety. And even though people are prepared, I don't know if you watched, I didn't watch the solar eclipse. I don't watch eclipses, but I like to watch them recorded. And so I watched the European Space Agency's show on the eclipse itself and how it took place in northern Spain. And, they're blathering on about all kinds of things around the eclipse itself, trying to describe it and talk about it. But in the moment of totality, they just had to shut up. You could hear them tripping over their words because there's something visceral that is happening that is bigger than us. And here we have it now on the side of the moon. And the North Node crossing the moon symbolizes that eclipse of the mind, an eclipse of the mental state. And if you're not in control, let's say, of your own awareness, if you are not in a place of recognizing who you are and where your information comes from and where your guidance comes from and where your spiritual connection is, it can be very destabilizing. And this is something that you can practice in advance and during the eclipse, where you bring yourself home to yourself and sit quietly and take time away from society, take time away from devices and away from the noise, and ask yourself, do I need to know all of these things? Do I need to know all this information? So we want to look at that from the Fomalhaut point of view, but also from the point of view of Rahu, which is about creating illusions and delusions. Its color is gray, like fog. It creates this kind of misty, foggy appearance. It's what overwhelms the moon, and that's what gives the moon this pinkish orange glow, because it's not quite a total screen. You can still see a haze that is filtering over the moon, but it's very much unclear. So we can't say that we clearly see the moon. The moon is eclipsed by that north node in this case. And so we're looking at the difference between what is an egoic desire and taking action from the place of, me, and what do I want, and what is going to keep my little self safe, and what is my righteous dharma? What is my action? What is the thing that I should be doing from a place of surrender and service to life itself? And to receive the blessings of this eclipse from that perspective of whether it be the more spiritual aspects of Pisces or the specific ones coming from Fomalhaut, And especially in terms of the conjunction with Fomalhaut, we have to align with this truth. And otherwise, if we don't align with that sense of, okay, there's a higher truth to my life, and I can move away from this panicked thinking about all of these other aspects of life itself and come right back to what is essential, then you accept what is going on, and you will actually find yourself with much more inner power. You're going to find yourself a much stronger person as a result. And that's the paradox, is you give up this trying to control from the level of the personality, and you move to this place of awareness that there is already an inner guidance, an inner GPS that you're carrying that is just simply needing more time, more space, more rest to get right, basically. So we had, as I mentioned, on the 11th of May exactly, that's where the North Node was, but it was all through May and early June. So that was when we had the equivalent, let's say, energy coming from Rahu itself, which is now in Aquarius. So you can go back, let's call it from the middle of May, but especially the 11th of May, and then exact on the 29th of May, Rahu was exactly where Fomalhaut is. It was exactly there. Um, and that is that was the degree of the moon of the 19th of May as well. So that was something interesting to pay attention to. May is an interesting callback to what was going on at the lunation of May. So there's a lot of things that you can uh, play around with in terms of looking back and forth. And as much as that feels important, I will give you dates that correspond to this. And before we move on into the chart delineation, I'm going to do that with the lunar cycle itself. So many of you like to work with that lunar family, the lunar gestation cycle. And the one that belongs to this particular eclipse or this lunation, because the eclipse and the lunation are actually two separate things, just as again, a pointer. Here you see the moon is at 4 degrees 50 minutes of Pisces, where the sun is at 4 degrees 53 arc minutes. So the eclipse happens just before the fullness of the moon. And it's a technicality, but it's a part of when you're in astrology really deep, you start to look for these little details. This is not the full moon chart. This is the eclipse chart. And those are slightly different. So the full moon comes a couple of minutes later on. And it is a long-lasting lunar eclipse as well, so something to take in mind, because often the longer that they last in minutes, because I think this one is actually like 6 or 7 minutes long. I forgot to note down exactly how long. That often translates into a longer impact going forward, and I feel like this is certainly part of the bigger picture of the middle of 2026 that we're looking at in terms of major impactful change going forward. Let me give you those dates then for the lunar family. The first part of this cycle was on the new moon in Pisces on the 28th of February, 2025. Now, that was the first new moon that we had in the eclipse cycle with the nodal axis, but because it was so far from the eclipse, it wasn't actually an eclipse. Sorry, it was so far from the nodes, rather, which were at the very, very end of Pisces. And so 20 degrees earlier in Pisces, we had the full moon, the new moon, rather. This is not, it was not an eclipse to start this one, but the new moon itself was on the 28th of February, and that was 9 degrees 40 arc minutes of Pisces. I'll put all of these dates down below as always. And then the opening square, or the first quarter square of this lunation, was on the 28th of November last year, 2025, at 6 degrees and 17 arc minutes of Pisces. That was when you start to realize what had happened or what had started in February, at the end of February last year, that needed some of your input, some change or some action to be dealt with based on that. And then now we're here at the lunar eclipse, which of course is at 4 degrees and 50 arc minutes of the eclipse. It's the lunation itself is actually 54 arc minutes, so it's 4 degrees 54 for the lunation, 4 degrees 50 for the eclipse. And of course, that's where awareness comes at the fullness of the moon. It's an awareness. It's a recognition of something. And I'm going to talk about that again when I come back to delineate the chart. Finally, we have then the third quarter square, which is closing down this cycle, and that's on the 28th of May next year, 2027, and that's at 7 degrees, 1 arc minute of Pisces. And that's the crisis of consciousness as this particular cycle closes out, and we evaluate, release, and let go of things based on what we recognize now is over. The culmination point of a full moon is the ending of something, and we let it go. We move beyond this phase and we recognize it's now over and we're letting go and we're releasing so that we can get into a new place. And then there's a new cycle that begins at the very, very end of this particular cycle. That is a 3-year cycle overall. And that will be a new cycle that starts at the new moon in Pisces on the 25th of February, 2028. And that's at 6 degrees and 20 arc minutes of Pisces. And so again, if we come back to the notion of the full moon as an awareness, as a culmination, as something that we recognize needs to be admitted or seen or understood once and for all, and especially with the ultimate sign, Pisces, the very last sign of the zodiac, really emphasizing this point. Something's done. We're moving on from this. We've had the nodes here. We've had all of this major shifting of the slower outer planets moving out of signs simultaneously within the space of just over a year, and then intensely within the space of just a couple of months, moving simultaneously into new territory from a tropical zodiac point of view. And what we're looking at here is the realization of what is over. And again, we can look at that collectively and we can look at that personally, but especially, again, I invite you to look at that from the nature of the mind itself. Look at where you want to reclaim your mind, reclaim your awareness, reclaim the capacity that you have as a human being to use your mind, to use your intuition, and to not allow yourself to be controlled or identify with things that are being used to control you. If we take a notion of something, a concept of like a nationality, for example, whatever term you want, you throw out a term, you throw out a nationality, throw out a political party, whatever it is that you decide is important, you look at that and really examine that and look for any level of truth in it. And you won't find it. And once you start to identify with it, then you realize now you're being played, you're being manipulated, and you're going to be acting from outside of your heart's center, from outside of your instinctive self. So we have this double meaning, which is added to by the impact of the South Node, which is in Leo. And as I'm doing this on the Tuesday, the 18th, we've also got the Sun in Leo. It's still in Leo now. And the Jupiter Sun South Node, all in Leo, really is emphasizing this whole story of shedding the image of individuated ego, this false self, and letting that image fall away. And we're getting that message now in spades at this eclipse. It's a huge opportunity for us to really recognize where we can actually step back and say, now, in this moment of time, I reclaim my awareness of life itself. I reclaim the sanctity of life itself, and I act from that place. And I act from that instinctive guidance that allowed me to know what I needed to do when I learned how to get up and walk as an infant. This is the built-in human instinct and memory and visceral knowing that has brought us here. Now, it's not to say that if you do experience fear or anxiety, that doesn't serve you in some way. So the best way to work with that is to look at it and say, okay, the anxiety is there. I'm feeling that. Why would that be there? What is my body or my mind trying to tell me? And try to understand the anxiety as an outer experience, not as a part of who you are. Don't identify with fear or anxiety, because if you do that, you can't look at it, you can't examine it, and it will overwhelm you. And so this again can be an opportunity for you to do that in a very deliberate way, to really break it down and look at that. So this South Node here is still on Regulus, and that has been true for a long time now, already 2 months. South Node has been on Regulus since June, And that's already pretty substantial as well. The fact that it's there is also another indicator of letting go of solar figures, letting go of leadership type positions, individuals especially who are what you might call rulers or government figures, perhaps even royal figures, people in literal royal families. The Regulus is the royal star. It's one of the other Persian stars. It's one of the four corners of, as I said, of the universe, of the spirit realms or the heavens. And so we're looking at something again that is saying things are changing from this point on. These in the old days, way, way back before GPS and stuff, centuries ago, these were navigational stars. They're the bright, bright stars of the sky, and they would orient people. And this is why it's so astrologically very interesting to use them as a template for understanding a little bit of what is being oriented in our experience right now, because things are coming together in a way that's incredibly compelling. Now, Regulus itself is too far, or rather, the sun itself is too far from Regulus and Mercury. So we're not going to talk about a conjunction there, even though if that were a planet, of course it would be. But for those of you who are learning astrology, for the fixed stars, we need ideally 1 degree to really jump up and get interested in the conjunctions. And it's always a conjunction and for only a conjunction to fixed stars, never anything else. And up to 2.1 or 2.4 magnitude. And you look at the magnitude of the star, and that tends to be what the orb of conjunction would be as the outer orb. So the sun is out of that orb, long out of that orb. And what is interesting, however, is that Mercury has just emerged from Cazimi, which is the heart of the sun. It's coming out of the sun at this point. And that's something really extraordinary at this time that's adding to this particularly eventful sky, this really eventful eclipse. Eclipses themselves are very striking and very powerful. Like I said earlier about watching the ESA and observing these highly, brainy scientific minds try and piece words together while they're observing this phenomenon that is just simply, you cannot describe it in any other way as spiritual. Of course, they used every word except that one. But here we are with Mercury, where Mercury is exalted and it's in its own sign. So that's called domicile. And normally, as Mercury is emerging from the heart of the sun, it's what we call combust. But there is an ancient sort of remedy to this combustion, and one of those is that it is in its own sign and it's exalted. And so it actually is saving Mercury from the worst of combustion, and yet we still have to consider it combust. It means that Mercury in the heart of this sign is highly subjective. Mercury represents communication, the actual content of the mind. So it's the thoughts and the way that we express those thoughts and the method and the means by which we are communicating. The mind itself being represented by the moon. So Mercury is not the mind, it's the contents of the mind and how we express that. And it's right there in the sun, which represents identity and it represents ourself. It represents our purpose, our higher mind, our higher purpose in the sign of Virgo, which is all around service. And again, we come back to this bigger message that I was conveying earlier with the moon Fomalhaut conjunction, which is about recognizing that there is something innate about our humanity, which is about being there in service to life itself. We can say to others, but that often people jump from the ego then to say, I'm not here for everybody else. I'm not here to serve. I've done enough serving. And you hear people defend that. That's the victim martyr dynamic of Pisces and Virgo coming through. I'm not talking about that. We want to get away from that. We want to look at what it means to be fully alive within the context of life itself. And this is where we get to the Virgo as this purification process with the contents of the mind and the devices and the communication and the way that we communicate, all of which is part of this eclipse and which is hidden behind the beams of the sun. We cannot see Mercury at this time, even though it's got a little bit of grace coming from the fact that it's actually in its own sign and it's exalted in Mercury ruled Virgo. Now, what am I seeing in that? It's another reference to us needing to really look at how we communicate, at the way that we use information, at the way we use our devices, at the contents of our mind. I think it's really hard to be more literal than that, at least from the way that I see things. So, can we find this opportunity now to look at something from this higher mind, the higher mind, and a better place? And that brings me to Jupiter, which rules Pisces. So it's ruling the lunation from Leo. Jupiter is currently at 12, almost 13 degrees, 1253 of Leo, already at the 28th of August, already at the eclipse. It's approaching 1 degree, exact 1 degree now, partile by trine. It's approaching Saturn. Remember that in 2020, there were three conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn in that fateful year. And we had all of that happened in Capricorn. So that was also with Pluto. Everybody piled in. It was, that was that year. So I'm not going to go back over 2020. I don't need to re-traumatize you. But this is where we are. Now we're opening out into a new vision of that, a new version of that, as the ruler of this eclipse is in the sign of the sun. Now, where's the sun? Well, here it is. It's here in the opposite, of course, part of the full moon. It's what is illuminating the moon, which is now blocked by the north node, and Mercury itself as the ruler of the sun, standing guard, standing by, working really hard to keep its dignity under the beams of the sun. It's working behind the scenes. Now, this is another way of looking at things, also from the point of view of the trine, that's very favorable in terms of an opening. The trine has the nature of Jupiter. It is always going to carry the nature of expansion and growth and flow. Not necessarily always good, as you heard me say many, many times when I was talking about the minor grand trine and the bigger basket configuration and so on. Looking at what is flowing is not necessarily looking at things being positive. It's just flowing. So what is flowing is the important question. And here what we have is Jupiter in a trine to a retrograde Saturn that's in fall. More important is that Saturn itself is squared or about to be squared by Mars, and that square takes place exactly on the 31st. So 3 days later, we have a square from Mars to Saturn, and Mars is quite strong in terms of rulership over Saturn, which is retrograde, but a retrograde planet is very strong. It's going back over old territory. And indeed, Saturn is going to be going back over the things that we've been experiencing basically since April. And it's going to be questioning all of it. It's going to be looking back from a personal perspective and from a political and geopolitical and collective perspective over everything that has happened since then. And then it's only on the 10th of December that Saturn actually stations direct at 7:55 of Aries. And in the meantime, there will be this kind of competition. Who gets to win? So now we've got this lovely, very favorable trine from Jupiter ruling this eclipse back to Saturn, which is not really comfortable, working hard to sort of find its place in terms of individuation, individuality, which, by the way, is also alter Pluto, finding power through being different, finding power through individuation, individuality, through our own personal idea of success, as opposed to success measured by somebody else or society or whatever, tax authorities. And here what we have is this quite powerful trine, but with one planet retrograde. Now, the next time that these planets trine, which will be the 3rd of April, Saturn will be direct and Jupiter will be retrograde. And so that's significant in of itself because they're still not figuring it out. They're working on it. They're working on a longer term plan, but they haven't really fully established the theme, let's say, or the way forward completely. And we have to wait until the 11th of July next year, 2027, so that they finally come back into a trine, and that Saturn trining Jupiter on the 11th of July will give us the answers to this dilemma that we're trying to work towards, that we're trying to expand into, remember, based on what started when they conjoined those 3 times in 2020. So we're finding a new way forward in that. Now, there's a bit of a spanner in the works here because of the square from Mars. But Mars is not in good dignity either. Mars is considered to be in fall. Saturn is in fall. And Mars is ruling Saturn. The moon is ruling Mars. And Jupiter is ruling the moon. But interestingly, Jupiter is also the it's the or rather Leo, the sun, is the exaltation ruler of Saturn. And so when we think of Jupiter with its rulership from the sun, we again have to come back to this notion of a change or a new way of seeing something. This is a new cycle of Mercury in the way that we think, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we do things. Now, the square from Saturn to Mars is never a friendly one, and it's especially not true, it's especially not friendly, pardon me, when neither of them are comfortable. So there will be a potential here for things being difficult. But we do have in the background this grace of the trine between Jupiter and Saturn, and Jupiter being so powerful at this particular time, where we find the full moon and the moon itself being so strongly indicative of something really different coming in. So this will be a bit like, okay, let's do this whole thing. Let's expand into this new thing. Let's see this new vision, which is, again, think of it as really, especially around the 30th, 31st of August, but particularly strongly in the last week of August and first week of September. Either way, both for Mars squaring Saturn as well as Jupiter trining Saturn. It's a tug of war. And then Mars is going to put on the brakes for something. Mars, or rather, Saturn is going to put on the brakes for something that Mars wants to accomplish. And what Mars is planning on accomplishing is coming also from this moon that is approaching a trine on the day of the eclipse, approaching the trine to Mars that says, I have a plan, I have this thing I want to do. And it's coming from this awareness. It's coming from this higher intentionality. On a collective level, the moon also represents the people. And so this can also be interpreted as something that the people are starting to recognize as a new way forward, a new thing that needs to be done. I would like to see that. What we do have to do to get forward, to move in a new direction, is once again check where we're getting information and how much of it is destroying our capacity to unite with each other, to be there with and for each other, as opposed to tear each other apart when fundamentally we are needing each other, forgetting that we need each other. And in this last week, we've seen a couple of really dramatic events of this kind of social tearing down. People in different countries around the world, there's so many different I'm not going to enumerate them all, but there were so many different incidences that were really, really the worst of humanity coming from all directions. There was felt like no innocent party in the whole story, and yet it felt like piranhas kind of lashing out, jumping in. And it was a very unpleasant thing to experience and watch. And I can only imagine what it felt like for all those different individuals, men and women, because this was a number of sequence of events that were happening around the world. It was absolutely phenomenal to watch. And for me, that centered on the eclipse energy of the week before that was really, really powerful. Tearing down, as I mentioned in that Leo eclipse video, a tearing down of this notion of identity, fame, this people being put on a pedestal. So that was a very interesting week from an astrologically good point of view, a very interesting week to observe all of that. Now, the interesting thing about all of this stuff, so whether we have these obstacles and this kind of stop start, as I said, Saturn puts the brakes on where Mars wants to move ahead, and it's trying to, the moon is trying to figure how to move ahead using the energy of this trine with Mars. And at the same time, the moon is eclipsed, and so there's a whole thing about the notion of things not. So we've got Saturn in exile, we've got Mars in exile, we've got the moon eclipsed, and we've got Mercury under the beams of the sun, hidden, even though it's struggling to do its best. It's not visible. And what is becoming visible at the time of this is Venus. So this is now was on the 15th of August. 16th, I think it was 15th of August, yeah. And then 16th of August, we had Jupiter visible. So 15th, 16th of August, both Venus and Jupiter are visible now. And so for Venus, she's visible in the early evening, and Jupiter, she is visible in the early morning. So this is pretty awesome. And this is an opportunity also that allows us to see that relational dynamics. Venus is very strong right now. She's the only dispositor in this chart. Actually, no, that's not true. Mercury is very strong too, but just weakened by being under the beams. So Venus, let's say, is in domicile. So she's clear and steady. She's in her domicile. And then Jupiter is quite strong at the moment simply because it's receiving this trine, or it's applying to rather this trine with Saturn, and that strengthens the two planets. It strengthens each other. And what is very significant here, you see this little line here, this means a semi-square. So if you see this line here between Uranus, and I'll get to Uranus, so some of you are wondering, when will she get to Uranus? I will get there. That's a square. You see that marked there. It's a very heavy red line, and that shows us that that's a very tight square. I will get to that. And here what we have is a semi-square. And a semi-square is possibly even more uncomfortable than a square. And it does require adjustment. So a square requires adjustment. It requires us to do something. We can't just sit there. We have to do something. So this is what all the red is. It's all of the application of needing to take care of something, needing to do something. And because we have this semi-square here with the Venus, Mercury, and Sun, what that means is 45 degrees of an angle. So you take the 20 degrees that Venus has accounted for, and then the 25 degrees that Mercury and the Sun have to move through to get to Venus, to get to the new sign. We've got 45 degrees. So we have this tension of action, a crisis that requires action, through the awareness here that we're already getting from this moon, which is also ruled by exaltation by Venus. So just a phenomenal chart, I find. This is such a loud chart for change in terms of how to find our need to change once and for all, how we actually behave on the surface of this earth, of God's green earth. This is where we need to learn this lesson. It feels quite urgent at the time of this eclipse. Now you see these other lines here. So we've got the semi-square here, and we've got this little, what looks like a square with a dangly thing here. And that is known as an inconjunct. And so that inconjunct here is where the signs don't line up. So a trine is from element to element. Inconjuncts they don't match. They don't, sorry, these are sesqui-squares. They're not inconjuncts. These are inconjuncts. Well, sorry, that's a totally different thing. These are inconjuncts here where you see this line and that little table that you see there. The inconjuncts don't match. The elements and the signs don't match. And here what we find is a sesqui-square. We got a semi-square here, half of a square, and a square and a half between Venus and the moon, and between Venus and Uranus, which itself is creating a T-square, or at least being squared by both the sun and the moon itself, as well as Mercury, which rules Uranus. So I've lost anyone who's not interested in astrology, but all of that to say that there's so much need for adjustment in this particular chart that it's going to be difficult to see our way through. And as I said here, with this, the ruler of this, basically the ruler, Jupiter, of this lunation, and the exaltation ruler of this lunation, Venus, not being able to really work through things yet. We're going to have to wait until, I think in terms of Venus, at the very least, when she comes back to this point almost comes back to this point when she comes through her Venus star point, when she comes through the Venus retrograde cycle from Scorpio back into Libra, which is October, November. And then for Jupiter, we're not going to get a complete story. We're not going to get a complete, let's say, way forward, or a sense of, okay, I'm really confident that I can do this thing and it'll hold tight. It'll work in a way that is actually really, it's got legs. It's going to do this thing that I'm hoping it will do right now. And that will be the 11th of July and thereafter. So we're looking at a span of time that also corresponds to the bigger arc of time that I provided with the different dates of the lunation itself. So lots to think about here in terms of yourself and how you might want to make changes in terms of also your way of relating to people, how you relate to society, how you relate to the internet itself, and how you'll find your way forward by, at this particular point, sitting out some of the interesting stuff, sitting out some of the things that used to draw you in, stepping aside from the chaos and noise, and really letting yourself meditate on it. So we're going to have also on the from the 30th of August, so 3 days after the eclipse, roughly, until about the 2nd or 3rd of September, we have Mars on Sirius. And again, as it's doing that, it's applying to this square with Saturn. So the end of August is, for me, an extension of this eclipse. It's not just this particular moment, but it's the days following. And one way that you can work with that again is to try and not engage too much around this time. If you have things that you need to get done, of course, deal with that. But just to slow your roll a little bit and pull yourself back from the mess and chaos. Really, really listen to yourself in terms of what is your fight and what's not your fight. You know, there are things that we're here to deal with, and there are other things that are best left to those who are directly concerned. Don't keep putting your 10 cents worth into every fight, and especially online, because this is a tool of mass distraction. This is the tool that is getting us to fragment our attention, to fragment our intellect, to dumb down our intellect, and to control us. And you really want to understand that that's deliberate, that's not an accident. It's the way that you understand the purpose of the product is what it does. You know, this is what it's supposed to do. It's not a byproduct. Or let's say it's a deliberate byproduct. So what's interesting here is that also, you know, about 2 days later, not even a day and a half later, the moon will come up across Neptune as well. And as it's coming up to Neptune and Saturn, when it's going between Neptune and Saturn, at that point, it's also squaring this Mars. So it's going to go into that, what is called a mutual reception between the moon, which rules Mars, and Mars, which rules the moon. So you might actually find that as we go around that period of the end of August, so just 3 days, maybe 4 days after the eclipse, you'll get some awareness of things that you can't get as clearly around the time of the eclipse. So recognize that things in your heart are truer. And when I say in your heart, meaning listening deep, listening into your heart, they're truer than the noise in your mind. And sometimes the noise in your mind was put there by in ways that you wouldn't even know. The number of times that I hear people defend ideas, wars, ideas around nations and people and cultures, and when you challenge on the idea, they don't know why they think that. They do not know why. And that's because this is how propaganda works. This is how being told what to think works. You give up your power of discernment. By the way, this is Virgo, discernment. If you give up your power of discernment, you will have your head full of other people's ideas, and it will not be for your own good, I can promise you. So we've got a bunch of planets here not really working from their highest place, and it's a good time to really slow down and sink in, as it were. So because of that Jupiter trine, again, it's good to focus on long-term ideas, long-range thinking, both individually and collectively. A higher-minded vision, again, that's that Jupiterian quality, the Pisces quality that is coming through the higher-minded vision for things. The vision is coming from Aquarius, particularly. Social vision, a future vision is very Aquarian. And then recognize also that the this is an opportunity to plan as opposed to a need to jump in and fix everything right off the bat, because things will be shifting a lot, especially around eclipse times. And it's good to just have a sense of what is open and available to you, what you are looking for deep inside, so that you will always have that inner guidance. You can do a visualization of your future self, visualizing where you want to be, how you want to feel. Don't worry about the details of it. Just get the feeling of who it is that you want to be in the future. How do you want people to be looking at you in the future? How do you want to feel around people in your future? How do you want other people to feel around you in your future? And if you keep looking in that direction, whenever you come across a choice, you will understand, is this taking me close to that vision or far from it? So think about all of these things at this time if you are able to set aside some time. And if not, just keep journaling whenever you can. If you're commuting to work or something, just make notes to yourself. Try not to always be plugged into somebody else's voice or thoughts. So the fact that we've got this newly emerging Virgo coming out of the heart of the sun, creating this new cycle, which will then be part of it'll be closing out when Mercury does its own retrograde in Scorpio. And again, that's October till November, starting on the 24th of October. Ending on the 13th of November, just as Venus ends her retrograde. So this is the start of something that, again, we will see results of as we go into the autumn, as we go into the last months of the year, for those of you who are in the Southern Hemisphere. And by the way, for those in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm now opening up 2 different timings for my astrology course, the intermediate course that I'm doing, which is going to be uh, morning and afternoon European time, which accommodates Sydney, Australia, like all of the Australian time zones, and then New Zealand, etc., Hong Kong, and so on. And then also in the afternoon to accommodate American, North and South American time zones as well. So you're welcome to attend both or all or any of those time zones when you sign up for that course. And I'll put that link down below. It's where I'm looking at the natal chart in an intermediate way to help understand how you can see your family patterns and these patterns of family issues that you're carrying in your life. And you can see that in other charts as well. So it's a rather novel way of looking at the chart that tends not to be the typical way. Right, so we do have this lovely Venus and Venus and Jupiter, which are supportive. That Jupiter, the Mercury is also supportive at this time. But as it's just coming out of the heart of the sun and it's just starting this new cycle, it is less able to function openly because we're not seeing Mercury. So again, good time for planning, good time to sort of hunker down, see what's possible, and not worry if things are not taking shape exactly in that moment. This is about endings as much as anything. So think in terms already of what don't I want? What am I ready to let go of? So you focus on that, your higher purpose and how this ties in to these aspects of what I've just described in this eclipse time. And then also in terms of the Leo Virgo houses of your chart, and I'll look at this sign by sign, you want to, look into how that higher purpose is tying into that as well. You'll get your, let's say, more solid response from the Jupiter in Leo, where you're looking at that now and saying, okay, so this is the one place where there's something consistent that I can look at in terms of the Leo qualities of leadership, of integrity, of wisdom, higher mindedness, and especially with the South Node, they're taking advantage of this because the South Node, Jupiter, can be very spiritual if we allow ourselves to surrender. Just like I said earlier with the quality of Pisces, it's about surrender. Ketu is about surrender, the South Node. It's about letting go and recognizing that we do things in the same way as described in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, the Gita was Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord is saying, you do the thing that you need to do your dharma, and just leave the fruits up to me. Just do what's necessary. And don't do it for likes, don't do it for clicks, don't do it for money. Do the thing that is necessary, and all is coming to you. Don't worry about it. Um, so this culmination time is a really beautiful, very spiritual time. I find that's the best way to use eclipses, because of the, this whole period of time being so chaotic in the world, but also politically in many countries, there's an enormous amount of political upheaval. The distraction levels are going to be off the charts. So I'm finally going to now point to our friend Uranus, which I briefly mentioned here as being a disruptor or being square, or being a major need for adjustment here, including in the sesquisquares that it's making to Venus, where what we find here is this wild card, this unpredictable energy of the eclipse, which is already part of the baked-in energy of any eclipse, is now being amplified by a very unpredictable shaking up of Uranus. And now this shaking up is going to be again in the realm of communication, the Gemini area of life, which represents in a general sense connection with each other. It's our peer group, it's our friends, our siblings. It's the capacity to be in neighborhoods and get along, basically. And it's being squared by its ruler. It's being very, very tightly squared, like within a few arc minutes of a square, by its ruler, 16 arc minutes. And so that's really, really significant. And of course, it's squaring the lunation itself. And or the lunation itself, technically speaking, is squaring Uranus. And so here what we have, these are all mutable signs, notice, huh? These are all mutable signs. The Pisces and Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius is the other mutable sign, which, by the way, is ruled by Jupiter. And we keep coming back to this Jupiter. It's like we can't get away from it. So we have um, this need for some kind of flexibility, without a doubt, a lot of change. And the change will not be so difficult in the sense that mutable signs, the mutability allows for change to happen. The mutable signs represent that turning point in the seasons. It represents the changeover between the fixity of one season and the cardinality of the next one. So it's this kind of midpoint, or the changeover point, between each of the seasons. And here what we find is this capacity for change, but that change is going to be abrupt. It's going to be potentially surprising, very sudden, and possibly, hopefully, very insightful. So Uranus can be disruptive, and it can also be insightful. Now, one of the things that is very, very strong, and it's ever since Pluto has gone into Aquarius, and so we're looking at more than 3 years already of Pluto in Aquarius, is this whole AI story. And honestly, I don't know very many people who are really excited about AI. Anyone who is, it's not really thinking very deeply about it, as far as I'm concerned. And so what we're looking at is, I suspect, because this is still a trine now, this is part of the minor grand trine that is still part of the bigger feature of our times for several years to come. But this notion of disruption in the communications, in the way that we connect and communicate, and what is going on in our mind, what is going on in our community, what is going on in terms of how we're relating to each other, this is huge right now. And I think there's going to be a lot of disruption around the whole idea of AI, not just around this particular time, but of course, this will be one of the trigger or flashpoints around those themes. And when we see at the extent to which dishonesty um, is being used deliberately, and even in a way that is almost nonchalant, you have this kind of throwing garbage out that are pure lies, and expecting people to just go along with it. And this has an expiry date. This can no longer go on. And just earlier, I was reading an article about how Israel has created a fake think tank called the Hanover think tank, with a sort of a fake Western name, even a German name, for some kind of authority. And it's all about Israeli propaganda around the genocide in Gaza. And it's what it's trying deliberately to do, and that's the stated purpose of the company behind it, is to feed misinformation into AI so that AI will use or misuse that information, because it will scrape anything that looks authoritative And this is what's happening to everything on the internet. And we found out that Anthropic or Claude is putting watermarks on people's work now. It has destroyed volumes of actual physical books, text, treaties, all kinds of paper agreements that it literally chewed up and spat out in order to scrape into the data into its AI, large learning models. Actually, it's better to say LLMs, because AI is really a misnomer. I think this artificial intelligence is just really repackaging human intelligence. And I think these are times for us to be on high alert to all of these things, not to get anxious about it, but to be really aware of what we are contributing to it. What are we feeding into it? So if you're feeling at this moment that those sudden insights, or you're finding, like, let's say, too many options, because this is also part of that, too much noise, too many options, um, then just again come back to that Jupiter in Leo and come back to that place of higher mind, from a place of integrity, from a place of what is serving my higher purpose and the purpose of the Leo house at this moment in your chart. And of course, you'll get the information from the Pisces house where this eclipse is happening, as well as the Aquarius house where the North Node is taking you. Um, so yeah, this is about really being on your path. Your path is the right path when you're following your inner guidance. If you notice these people who are working on the high tech level and they're in that sort of technocratic, dogmatic way that we're all being marched into, they're dead behind the eyes. If you look at them, they're literally dead. They're not well. They're not in touch with their soul. And if they were, they would step away from it. And some people have, to their credit, they have stepped away from it. And those are the whistleblowers that are frequently trying to, be shut down by bigger voices. But you will know that you're doing the right thing by the aliveness that you feel in yourself. You're going to feel aligned with other people. You can look yourself in the mirror. You can look your dog in the eyes. You can look your kids in the eyes. And you don't have to avert your gaze because you're doing the right thing. So, this is where we can just do what we can to bring ourselves to the table in an authentic way, because the whole universe is held together by each of us doing our dharma. This is one of the meanings of dharma, is to hold together. It's one of Sanskrit has always 36 different meanings in every composite word. It's a very, very significant language. And dharma, one of the very powerful meanings of dharma is the capacity to pull things together, to hold things in place, hold things together. So it's not just a path. It's not like my life, what's my life purpose? That notion is coming from the ego. If you just stop asking that question and listen, you know exactly what you're here to do. The idea that you're confused about your life purpose, it just shows that you're not paying attention to yourself, that you're paying attention to everything around you, and you're measuring yourself by outer circumstances. So as we go forward, there is no better moment than this moment, than now. Any moment, this present moment is the moment to be, and it's there where you put your full awareness. And so you just have to sit with yourself and trust that that's sufficient, because part of the ego, part of the anxiety, and part of what we've been trained into is a feeling of inadequacy based on this hyper commercialism, this hyper, the Instagram era that says you're not good enough. You have to have more, be more, own more. You have to be more beautiful, more physically representative of something. And now everybody looks the same. We're insane. And that's happened in a really, really short period of time. So there's no better moment than this moment to really sit with your full awareness in this, particularly this lunar eclipse. Stop waiting for salvation. Stop waiting for some romanticized moment of awakening. Stop waiting for this idea that everyone is going to float off to some astral plane where things are better. It's already here. You know that old Zen saying, chop wood, carry water before enlightenment. After enlightenment, chalk wood, carry water. And that's the story. That's what it is. Pisces is the dissolution of the individuated self. So when we let go of the notion that I am doing this or I am experiencing this or that, this anxiety, this suffering, this inadequacy, whatever the thing is, that's originating from the mind. And so when we let go of that, or we make peace with that, and we can make peace with our anxiety and our anger and fear and any other pain, then by doing that, we can also accept, allow, and find more spaciousness, more room. You're actually going to be able to, you'll see more clearly that all of those emotions, like I said earlier, are trying to reveal something to you. They're trying to, tell you something about yourself, about how far off center you are, how far you've drifted away from yourself. And this is an opportunity. It feels like an urgent call to come back to yourself. And I say that to all of us. Let's come back to ourselves so that we can collectively live better. A lot of the work that I do with people in individual charts and when I'm doing individual sessions, a lot of what I'm doing is working on unresolved trauma, unresolved family stories that are causing generations of pain. And when we look at that and we really understand that in the chart, we then come to this point of choosing, okay, this needs to look different from here on in, and to understand where that's coming from. And if we look outside of ourselves collectively, we're looking at unresolved trauma in all these different activities, all these different wars and competitions, and even the notion of, believing in something like a state or a flag or whatever. All of these false ideas and that people get all emotional about. If you're emotionally triggered by something, it doesn't belong to you. Your ego is defending something. Something that is true will not trigger you. You're imperturbable when you're operating from your inner truth. People can say whatever they want to you and you will be imperturbable. It's only the ego that gets upset. How dare you insult my country? How dare you say whatever, something about my president, whatever the thing is. It's the ego. None of it is real. So let go of this personal identification, this ego identification, and start to identify with life as a thing, just life itself. We're not the doer here. We are part of life. And this is where the Pisces Virgo axis of victim martyr will be released, because we can only be in that victim martyr place if we identify as an individual self, that there is something that we're clinging to that we don't like, that we don't want to have anymore, or that we're grasping for something better, or something that feels like it's unattainable, or that somebody's preventing us from getting it. And it's that leads to suffering. That notion is coming from the ego. But when we surrender in the truly Piscean way, not an egoic way that says, I'm here for you like a doormat, but really surrendering to being a participant in life itself, being a part of it, whether it be the, Asian Tao, or, all of the different South Asian ancient traditions spoke about this in Sufism, in terms of Islam, and Christian mysticism in terms of the message of Christ. All of these things said the same thing. We're just a part of life. And we are not doing this. We're not the ones creating all of this. It's simply that we are participating in it. And the way that we participate in life, in our life, or in all of life itself, is going to impact all of us. And this is why it's more helpful to recognize that you're a part of all of life, as opposed to saying, like, my life, my problems, my thing. So fundamentally, if we can release the over-identification with self, then we can enter into the flow of life and we just become a part of it rather than trying to control it. And this Aquarius North Node, we've got almost 20 months of this Aquarius North Node. And we've got this opportunity now to create a new vision for life. This is a new vision for all of us, and especially in the natal placement that you find Aquarius, you can look to that and say, where is the new vision coming through? Where can I work with that? And to recognize, okay, there's something I can do in my little corner that represents my contribution to what life is asking from me. And how can I participate? And notice that the levels of anxiety, the levels of stress disappear because you're not putting yourself into the larger frame of reference of a fake society, a fake measure of happiness or success, or value for that matter. So before we go sign by sign, I just want to remind you, like I said before, I've got this new course coming up for those who want to learn astrology from me. This is more for the intermediate crowd, and that would be about learning how to read charts, and particularly learning how to read charts from the perspective that I look at them, which is trying to find the family story in the chart itself. And so we're looking at the chart, looking through the different characters that each of the planets plays and the roles that they play in the chart. And then we're going to work through that step by step to understand how to read a person's chart from that perspective. Now, you can layer that onto all other ways of reading charts and then just bring a lot more to the table when you're reading either your own chart or somebody else's. Equally, for a lot of people are, and th those details are below, by the way. So we start in September. We start on the 27th of September. We go for 9 weeks together. And as I mentioned earlier, there is an option to choose different times on every Sunday where hopefully it accommodates everyone's time zone. So you're not having to get up at like 5 in the morning or stay up till 1 at night, which some of my students have done, bless you, to attend the courses. I'm as a sleep deprived person myself, I don't want to do that to anybody else. So we're going to have 2 sessions each Sunday, and you can join both or either one, whatever works for you. And if you can't be there, they're all recorded anyway. And then for those who are not quite ready to do an intermediate course, you I have a course that I just uploaded to my website, which is really interesting in terms of trying to understand the signs as a derivative of all of the other signs. So each sign is like a fractal of the greater zodiac. So trying to understand where the signs derive their meanings. And so you'll find that course also on my website. I'll link it again below. You will be able to follow that one. It's 10 hours that you can do in your own time and as a self-paced course, and hopefully find that enriching. You'll learn all about the signs, you'll learn about the houses, and of course the planetary rulers of the signs as well, all while we're looking at how the signs interrelate and what makes, say, a Leo a Leo. So let's have a look now as we go forward. We're going to actually go backwards here and put Aries on the ascendant. And then for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, we're looking at this eclipse in the 12th house. So very interesting tie-in with what I was saying in terms of your spiritual awareness. This is very true for Aries in this particular eclipse idea. And that moon is in your 12th house where you can really sit quietly with yourself and understand what is your instinctive self asking, where is your intuition maybe being clouded over, or where is it that you need to really pay more attention, listen in, paying more attention and being more aware. And a part of the story of this eclipse is coming through the sixth house of work. What is this new thing that you're looking at in terms of your service or work or health or illness? All of the sixth house things are things that we need to take care of. We need to pay attention to those on a practical level. And with the Pisces in the 12th house, there's something that you become aware of in terms of what you might be doing that you need to recognize is causing a problem. And it's time to end that. It's time to stop that. Now, the moon that is in Pisces is ruling your fourth house where you find your ruler, Mars. So there may be something of an emotional upset or some story around lineage, a family story of potential endings or loss that can come through your own personal experience or older family story. Mars also rules your eighth house of family secrets. And so there may be something here that you want to look at in terms of family dynamics or emotional dynamics, psychological dynamics that are playing a role here in terms of what it is that needs to come to an end. Of course, this is where we were looking earlier on at the Mars squaring Saturn in your first house. And this is perhaps an opportunity for you to slow down and really look at things and say, okay, the things that I thought were kind of moving forward in this particular direction, they require a little bit more of my assessment or slowing down and recognizing things from this different place, because this is giving you a different perspective now with that moon there. There's also a trine coming very favorable to you in a trine from your fifth house. Jupiter is trining back to the Saturn in your first house. This will go on 3 times for you, Aries. And so really reconfiguring you in a beautiful way, being fully self-expressed. And it's part of the journey of Saturn in your first house, and certainly supported a lot now that Jupiter is in your fifth house. Jupiter also rules your ninth house of your place of dharma, your sense of higher purpose, what gives your life meaning, and what it is that you want to, how do you want to guide yourself through all of those things. And of course, it rules the moon, where we find Pisces in your 12th house as well. So a very opportune time to come to this pure essence of who you are and get to this place of being more clear. With the Mars in your fourth house, there may be a need for you to sever ties, or to sever a way of being or a way of connecting with your family of origin or with your lineage in order to get to this place. This doesn't have to require violence. It's simply a distancing or a separation that allows you to differentiate yourself. And this is part of a bigger journey. You're taking responsibility for who you are right now, Aries. So make the most of this, a beautiful time. Oh, and briefly, I forgot to mention the North Node, of course, in your 11th, as it is, over an extended period of time. I've done videos already on this that you'll find on my channel. And that North Node in the 11th is contributing to this story of the moon in your 12th, which says about the future, this thing needs to change. It's this thing that you need to recognize is done now. You've done the cycle. Listen to the dates of the lunar family to get the previous cycle of 18 months and the next cycle of 18 months to understand how you can work with that. And then the North Node says we're doing this differently going forward, and especially in connection to your dreams for the future, the way that you want to connect socially with people, and work in a different way on a regular basis. This is something that there's a whole new cycle beginning in terms of work, in terms of how you contribute to what it is that's important or necessary for you to do in this lifetime, or at the very least in this moment of your life. All right, Aries, make the most of that, and I'll see you in the next video. For Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, your ruler, by the way, is in the sixth house. So she, as I mentioned, is visible now at the time of this eclipse, and she was invisible until the middle of August. And so that also is really helpful for you. Often it feels, traditionally anyway, it was considered that when the planet is visible, it operates better. It gives us a better fighting chance to do the things that we want to do. And so for you, it's here very much in your sixth house of work and what you need to deal with in terms of health or obstacles to overcome. And the lunation is also ruled by exaltation by your ruler Venus. And the lunation is in your 11th house of the future. And it's showing you something about the way forward, or about people and relationships. There may be an ending of relationships, or some friends or friends groups, or a social group, political group for that matter, or some other type of group that you connect with, where there's a change. And the change is based on something you're realizing at this time. The North Node is part of this eclipse, and it's taking your attention into the 10th house of your personal ambition and your authority, your inner authority, but also the authority that you express out in the world, how people see you or how you want to be remembered, your reputation as well, and also your social status. So there's a lot there that you can work with in terms of personal vision for the future, or the way you want to reach out into life, and especially as Venus is helping you make that much more sort of an everyday pragmatic change. This is part of the Venus retrograde cycle. I'll be doing another video on that coming up this week, in fact, with Julia Simas. And we're going to be looking at that Venus retrograde. So for Taurus, a very important retrograde cycle for you. And that will include your relationship house as well as your work house. So plan in this longer vision of things, how your future needs to feel, and who's coming along for the ride. Equally, your exaltation ruler, which is, sorry, not your exaltation ruler, thinking about Venus and Libra, but anyway, Saturn is in the 12th house, squaring Mars in your third house. And so there might be something here also that you recognize needs to change in your everyday life, that's in a practical application. That's something that might have to do with you literally changing how you use your skills and tools and talents, how you communicate things. Are you clear around what you communicate? This is one of the challenges for Taurus, is the The fact that Aries is in the 12th house for Taurus, I described this in the course that I was talking about, to how to understand the signs. The fact that Aries, ruled by Mars, is in the 12th is often one of the reasons that we can see that Taurus has difficulty expressing how it's feeling or expressing anger. But this is perhaps a time that you need to do that. Saturn, of course, is in a square, is squared by Mars, and it's being ruled by Mars as well. So there's something that requires you to be, let's say, more honest with yourself, take responsibility for how you feel about things, take responsibility for also how you're setting yourself up, maybe to not succeed. You will still have Chiron moving back into this house by the middle of September. I'll do another video on that. But Chiron is currently just backing up from the very beginning of your sign, and it's just checking in one last time over the next few months how you're doing on that self-sabotage, where you're making yourself feel upset or separate or distant and unloved or whatever the thing is, and where you need to take action on that. Be honest, speaking from the heart, or communicating in a way that feels more authentic. Equally, we have in a lovely trine from you now, we have a Mercury reborn in the heart of the sun as part of this full moon. And that can be very supportive in terms of starting a whole new cycle of self-expression or a new relationship around love or children or your creative process as well. And also with the Jupiter trining back to Saturn from your fourth to your 12th, there can be a lot of consideration that is really more hidden from other people, more sort of private, emotional stuff, or things that have to do with where you need to reconnect with your family, with your ancestors, with your lineage, with your family of origin, your original family, or just around home, what home feels like as well. And so there's something that's actually very constructive helping you behind the scenes here. Can feel very nourished in that way. And then the nodes, again, finally with the South Node in the fourth house, it's also a connection that is it's an opportunity to recognize that that's something to move away from or release at this time, or to allow yourself to just go with the flow in that sense of what's coming through the fourth house of your emotional center, your psychological and even maybe material security needs. Let go of that and trust a little bit more, and have that sense, especially of the North Node going in the 10th house, that you can actually, and maybe need to in this time, step up and take more responsibility for how you're operating in the world, how you're showing up in the world. And again, often I get these comments, and it's coming from Taurus, which is a very passive sign. It's waiting for stuff to happen. People will say, I don't have a job, I'm not doing anything, I'm retired, I don't go out, I don't even have friends. And what I can say is that you still are contributing to this world. You are still showing up in the world. How are you showing up is up to you. And that's the question. It's these are times of change, and you can choose differently. And this is a great opportunity for you to step out into a different role in the world, and to recognize that there's a place where you can show up and express a part of who you are in a better way that is better for you, better for everybody, to allow yourself to feel part of life itself. You cannot separate yourself out from life. So even if you stay closed in, shut away inside your home, you're still not separate from life. It's just your mind that thinks you are. And so what is the impact of you doing that on other people? And is there somebody out there, including just a plant or a bird or something, that needs feeding and watering? And then can that take you out the front door, for example? All right, Taurus, I will be back with more, because we will be talking about your ruler a lot in the weeks ahead. So I'll be back and tell you a little bit more about that as we get through this week. Bye for now. Gemini, of course, your ruler is just stepping out of the heart of the sun in the fourth house of your root of your chart, the home, the emotions, the root of your family, the connection that you have with your lineage, your emotional, psychological security, your safe space, as it were. And it's being squared, or rather, it is squaring Uranus. in your first house of self. And this is part of the bigger change mechanism. It's going to trigger something that you will notice as change. And where will you notice it? It'll probably be most noticed in this highlighted area, which is shown by the eclipse itself. So the moon is being eclipsed in your 10th house. And there's some aspect of how you're showing up outside in your career, perhaps in your marriage even, or in the dynamic around society, how you reach out into your profession or into your role in the world, your personal ambition. It's kind of done. We're done here. It's like there's something that is calling you to change in a dramatic way. The Mercury cycle is beginning the new 3-month cycle that will end at the end of the Mercury retrograde phase, which is November. So you can use this because it's your ruler, you can use that Mercury cycle from now until the end of November, where you really look into how you want to change, because that Mercury retrograde is happening later on in October, November in your 6th house of work. So whatever this is, it's a change that I've been describing in different ways for a long time already, since mid-2025. And if you're still not quite sure how that needs to look, then this is the opportunity to really look what your heart's desire is telling you. And here we have the North Node in your 9th house, again, along with this Pluto, which is on Altair once again, saying, you've got this thing you need to do. It's trying to call you out. It's trying to say, show up and do this thing that you're here to do. Now, what is that? This is a beautiful trine still between Uranus and Pluto. Uranus is direct for another few weeks, and then it's going to start to retrograde, and they'll once again keep coming back and forth into the exact trines. But still, they're holding a really tight trine here, just 2 degrees of a trine, which is very, very tight, especially for an outer planet. So lots and lots to work with here in terms of developing, in terms of going in a new direction. And it's coming from this place of being more honest and sincere and raw and different, um, in a way that you've already kind of known you had to step up. So this is your opportunity. I was talking with my daughter about this because she's changing work. She's not a Gemini, but anyway, this is relevant to you, but she was changing, she's looking into different ways of expressing more creative stuff as she's working. And I had posted in our family chat a meme that I saw, which was, the job market is so bad now that I think I actually have to live my dreams. And I think this could be your motto, Gemini. So put it on your fridge. If it's not about that, it's whatever it is. This relationship is so done that I think I need to start living my dreams. My role here is so done that I think it's time for me to live my dreams, right? So whatever that is, it's time now, Gemini. This is the change. Venus is lovely in your 5th house. She's trinal to you, creating this really nice supportive energy here. And although this is a square and a half, so that sesqui-square can require a lot of adjustment. Don't need to nail it down. Don't worry about that right now. You just need to recognize how much everything is going to change and trust that this is your time. This is the thing that needs to change. Part of that is about relationships and self-expression, about how you're creative and how you're expressing that creativity. You have so much right now lined up in terms of the capacity to create and express, to relay information. This is a very big part of the North Node also in your 9th house, which is about designing something that you might be able to show people, the way, show people knowledge and wisdom. This is anyway part of the Gemini kind of dynamic, is teaching and learning, communicating. And you've got Jupiter in your 3rd house of communication and expression. And it's a beautiful opportunity as Jupiter is trining Saturn 3 times, as I mentioned in the introduction. Between now and July, Saturn is being trined 3 times by Jupiter as they go through their retrograde dances. And this is pulling your 3rd house and 11th house together. So the lot of social connection. Jupiter rules your 7th houses of relationships as well, and 3rd house of peers and neighbors and siblings and families and extended family. That Saturn is in the 11th house of groups and social circles and networks and the audience as well. So whatever you're doing here, you can really generate something lasting something that feels like you're establishing something. So don't fret if things are not quite in place right now. This is a good time to sit and plan, dream your way through. Mars is in the second, squaring that Saturn. So there might be an issue here that has to do with money or that has to do with your values, and there's a need to readjust based on values or your own sense of value. If you're holding yourself back based on a lack of self-worth, this would be the opportunity to really look at that and say, okay, to what extent am I buying into the story of my ego? Am I not remembering that I am here as an equal part of life to express myself and to bring something forward? And so this could be, again, if it's about money, because these are both money houses, if there's something holding you up there, then just trust that when you're doing the right thing, you will find creative ways forward to work through money, to work towards abundance and so on. It may not be right now. The second house is also family. You have both the Mercury Sun in your fourth house of your family lineage and the mother side of the family, and also your inner space and maybe your own personal family. And then Mars in the house of family can also create a bit of a ruckus. There can be something going on there that may create some tension around the family. Is this because you're deciding to step out of a relationship? Is it because you're deciding to step out of a job, or you're realizing that you need to do something different around issues of money? That all can come together that might create some friction at this time. But remember, the whole point of this is to get to that place of understanding this, whatever this 10th house thing is, the social status, the work, the career, the way that you measure and weigh yourself based on other people's opinions. Something's coming to an end here, and it must. It's a very clear, sharp ending. So look back to the introduction if you're confused about what I'm suggesting here. If you haven't listened to that, this will be an important part of this. And I wish you all the best, Gemini, and I will see you in the next video. Cancer, this eclipse is happening in your ninth house of your higher learning, your place of your vision, your purpose for your whole life. So it's not like the future vision, but it's like, why am I here? Why am I alive? And there's a feeling that there's a phase that's done. There's something that's changing here. There's a way of showing up or a way of doing the thing that you're doing, or maybe the actual thing itself that is different, that needs to be modified, or that is being modified, and that you're responding to that change. I see this as something that can be quite productive in many ways, because at the same time you have a very fortunate support from Jupiter, which is your exaltation ruler and also the ruler of this eclipse. So having, your moon, your ruler is being eclipsed, and what that suggests is that there's a role that you're playing that is changing, and it's based perhaps on new sets of values or a new vision for what you need to do to earn money. Or how it is that you need to show up to do, what you do. There's a different way of valuing your work or your contribution or something like that. And again, the moon being eclipsed by the North Node, think of it not as you being eclipsed. It's not that you yourself are being eclipsed as a human being. It's the identity. It's the sense of what it was all about. And that's changing. And so this, as I said in the introduction, do please listen if you haven't heard that. This is an opportunity for you to really sit back and allow things to digest. This is a very Cancer word. Allow things to be digested and to work your way through slowly, and recognize that there are times when you're going to need to uh, figure it out as you go, as opposed to trying to have a clear plan right now going forward. And the more that you stay quiet, and this is why I'm a Cancer moon and ascendant, and this is why I'm pulling myself, not just because of this eclipse, but overall, I'm feeling the real need to pull myself away from so much interaction and noise and disruption and frivolosity and just all kinds of things that are really not contributing to anything positive overall. I'm inviting you to do the same, where you sit with yourself quietly more often and you come back into a space of what is serious and real for you from the inside out. What is your heart saying? And if your heart is saying, I don't know, or if your heart is saying, just don't do anything, then just don't do anything and trust that this is just a pause. Remember that Cancer has cycles. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and there are lunar cycles, and Cancer of all of the placements is known for these fluctuating cycles. This is part of the being a Cancer. And that changeability, that changing dynamic is necessary, is a part of your growth and evolution as you go through life. And that, this is a trinal eclipse for you. So this is whatever this is bringing you, it's bringing you something that is going to be easier for you to work with, let's say, or to envisage and to see working in a different way. Of course, we also have the North Node, which is part of this story, and the North Node is going through the eighth house, and that's the house of change through crisis, transformation through potential death, or letting go of something that is not necessarily the what you will have wanted to let go. Let's say we can put it that way, or it can be around a new source of support that comes through other people, through work that comes in different forms, different ways of earning livings. The eighth house is how you receive money from other people, including clients or passive income, for example, this kind of thing. And there's ways of things, changing, with your exaltation ruler Jupiter here in your second, there's something that you're restructuring anyway around your finances, around your values, around your self-worth, and even including around your family. And it's very significant because Jupiter rules not only that ninth house, but also your sixth house of work. So the work and health story is tied into this. Is your job killing you would be a good question. Is the way that you're doing your job working for you or against you? Whatever that is for you, it's part of this story. Now, in the third house, we have the opposition here from the sun to the moon. That's creating the full moon that makes this whole story of an eclipse. And we have Mercury in the heart of the sun. So this whole story is about your choices. The third house is about willpower and choice, and what it is that needs to be done in terms of practical skills. Like what do I need to organize right now? This is Virgo third house. This is why Cancer is so good in the day-to-day stuff, because it's Virgo on the third house. Like let me do that. Let me take care of that. This is what I describe in this course that I've just posted on my website. And and so here you're looking at all of these factors of the individual that is, the Cancer individual that is trying to figure out that how do I quantify my skills, or how can I develop my skills, or how can I express my skills? And the third house is also very specifically about communication as well, and the local space. And this can also be an opportunity for you to realize you've got something that you can say, or that you want to teach, that you want to express, or communicate even in terms of your siblings or extended family, potentially, or friends even. And it's new, it's different. This can also be where you recognize that there's a more practical role than you had considered before. You have 3 months to work through this particular phase, because then Mercury will be retrograding in your fifth house, trinal to you. And that retrograde cycle will show you something about how you express love, or how you express part of who you are, how you connect with your children. This can also be around your children, the life of your children. It can be about home as well. We've got Venus now visible in the root of your chart at the fourth. And then Jupiter, of course, is visible now. I mentioned that in the introduction. So both of these planets working really well currently, and Venus very strong in her own sign. And the one challenge here for you, so there's something that's harmonious again about your family, emotions, home, etc. The one challenge is this bit of a disruptive factor coming from Mars. And Mars is squaring Saturn as well in your 10th house. So the issue of how you show up, is there something that you need to do more powerfully or less powerfully? Do you need to turn the volume up or down? Um, is it about anger? Is there something that you need to express, or that you are going to be challenged to deal with? Is this something of a challenge in terms of career and the way that you're working through your ambitions? Mars rules your 10th house of career. It rules your fifth house of love and children as well, and self-expression and entrepreneurial stuff. So it can be very productive. It's not just because Mars goes through the first house that suddenly you're an angry person. it can be extremely productive. It's just that Mars doesn't work so well in Cancer because what happens is it's kind of like, I don't feel like it. It's like Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. Mars doesn't do so well in Cancer because it's fluctuating all the time. And Mars is like, get going. We have this thing to do. And Cancer's like, no, I don't feel like it. Mars does well in water sign Scorpio because it's fixed and it rules Scorpio. So it's like it's got an agenda. Don't worry, but not in Cancer. And so one of the things that you might need to do is periodically step back and look at yourself and say, do I need more outer motivation or a reason? Do I need to remind myself what it is this thing that I'm working towards changing? Or do I need to take a rest? Do I need a nap? Any of those things will be valid on any given day. And this is part of the Mars. So don't stress unless you personally have Mars in Cancer, which creates a very different energy then because that's part of your chart. There's no need for you to feel like you're going to be triggered to be angry, especially if that's not an issue anyway in your natal chart. So there we are. So use that Mars. It's great, but also recognize that your energy will be fluctuating potentially, and again, depending on how it's hitting your natal chart. Okay, I think I said it all there for Cancer. There's other elements that come through the introduction, and of course, some are longer lasting journeys that we're on. So you'll be hearing me saying more and more about these things as we go forward. See you in the next video. Leo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Well, this is actually happening in your eighth house where we have this eclipse of the moon in your house of intimacy, and that can include emotional or sexual or relational dynamics of all kinds and psychological intimacy. It's the house of secrets and crisis. It's things that are emerging through your awareness. The fourth, eighth, and 12th houses are about what feels private or hidden, secret even. And that eighth house might be revealing something about your marriage or about family secrets or about psychological situations that you're ready to look at and say, this is done here. We're moving on. And the North Node, Pluto, that whole dynamic in your seventh house will have already been showing you in many ways. Certainly, Pluto alone will already have been showing you what needs to change in your relationship sector. And then Jupiter in your first house is boosting you in such a lovely way to give you a real sense of yourself, your role, your identity, not from an egoic place, not from a need to be like acknowledged or seen, which is the older version, the sort of wounded child version of that, but rather the capacity that you have and the recognition for that capacity. And so this could be really showing you there's something holding you back that can actually be about the way others are treating you or the way you're interacting with others behind the scenes. This might be about money as well, because the eighth and second houses are money houses. And of course, we find the sun beaming its light on the moon from the second to the eighth, and then Mercury is there. So there may be issues here around how you divide up money, how you use money, how you share money with your intimate partners or with other family members, or where money comes in. And there's something that you recognize is done, and that can also be where you recognize that money may have been used as a control for you in the relationship or in a dynamic of not recognizing your own self-worth. And so this is also the house of other people's values, where there's a realization like, I don't share those anymore, that I do not share those values. There's a whole new start here in your house of values with Mercury in the heart of the sun. By the way, your sun is the ruler, this sun is the ruler of your sign. So very significant that it's whenever it's involved in a lunation or an eclipse, of course, it's part of you. Same with Cancer. There's always this really big story about involving you and your identity, the way you portray yourself or work through life. Now, we've got Venus, and by the way, Jupiter is visible now in your first house, so I think you'll find more mojo, more energy coming through, and it's also coming up to a trine with Saturn. And we have also Venus, which is visible in your third house of communication, the house of friends, siblings, connecting with people, skills, talents, and gifts and stuff. And you've got Jupiter in your first house ruling your fifth house of expressing those talents. And then you've got Venus in your third, and then Mercury, Sun in your second, where a lot of talent can come through this time, where you really start to recognize, whoa, I am really good at this, or I really do have talent for these things, and this is the thing I want to do. As well as Uranus that is in your 11th house, changing your relationship to who watches that, who's the audience, who are you showing that to? How are you relaying what you're doing? And here we have this Venus in a sesqui-square to Uranus. So whatever this is, this realization or this way of communicating, it's not quite comfortable. It's not, it needs some kind of adjustment, or it's recognizing there's a pattern here that is shaking things up. And that might be in a fantastic way. It doesn't mean that it's bad. A shake up can be where you're kind of shaking off cobwebs and realizing, no, I got to do this thing and I've got to be myself. Uranus is about being really kind of unapologetically yourself. And there it is in the house of the society or the others, the viewers, the audience. Um, this is also another money house, that 11th house, and so that's a bigger story overall about being somehow your earnings and gains coming through what you do is also perhaps impacted, and Venus is ruling your 10th house of career, which is also where we find Chiron, and that can be an opportunity also to recognize what needs to change, or what you need to do to accept your authority, let's say, in terms of career. This has been the very, very brief journey of Chiron from mid-June through mid-September, just kind of hinting at a need to maybe become more of an authority in your own role out in the world. Aside from all of this story that's quite supportive and favorable, is that Mars is in your 12th house. Now, this can be tricky for two reasons. First, in the 12th house, Mars is difficult, where it can express, or you may feel, agitation or anger, and it can be where you realize where you have anger, where you hadn't really acknowledged it. Maybe you noticed that going back. I've already spoken about this Mars in Cancer because we talked about that at the previous eclipse video, and that Mars in Cancer was, of course, part of the retrograde cycle between Cancer and your sign Leo. And that was from in September, October of 2024, and then again January through April of 2025, where Mars was in this house. And so you may be recalling something. It's a more brief sort of moment in time, but it's these 6 weeks can show you where you're angry and where you haven't really recognized that. And Mars rules your 9th house, where it's squaring Saturn at this time. And that is maybe an issue around your father. There's always some issue with Leo around the father, the figure of fathers, or the role of father, or leadership, or identity, or finding one's purpose and identity that is somehow part of a father wound. And so this could be part of that story, because Mars is also the ruler of your 4th house of lineage. So is there anger towards a parent or both parents, or is there some kind of shame or anger around the family in a general sense, or the father in particular? This would be a great place to observe and to notice where any revelations are coming through this lunation at this time, this eclipse. Finally, the North Node, of course, is a part of this eclipse, and it's going to be with reference to how you relate. So this is part of what's going forward, is as the moon is revealing something here in that inner experience, it's showing you now this is the new way forward, a new way of relating. All right, so good luck with that, Leo. I think it could be a very big game-changing eclipse for you in a very positive way. I'll see you in the next one. So, Virgo, your ruler is in your sign now, being reborn in the heart of the sun, just as the eclipse is forming on your house of relationships. So there's an awareness, there's a realization that a stage or a phase or a person is passing from the relationship cycle in your life. There's either a format, a relationship format, a structure, or even a partnership of some kind, like a business partner, a personal partner, or it's a qualitative change. That is, you're recognizing something. You and Pisces share this fateful axis of this victim-martyr dynamic. And I spoke to that in the beginning of this video. So it would be a really good thing to review, where you can recognize that actually there's something now I need to look at here. and to maybe see in a new way, see in a way that feels more empowering, and to recognize where there's actually something that has been holding you away from the other, holding you away from relationship. This is part of the Saturn and Neptune in your eighth house. I'm not speaking much about Neptune now. I'm just trying to keep this focused. But Neptune, of course, plays a role here in Aries in your eighth house for a very long time. And the Saturn in your eighth is really showing you where there may be issues of intimacy that need redressing, ways of bonding, ways of committing, taking a serious step towards commitment or towards responsibility, whether it be responsibility within a marital type relationship or in terms of money, finances, exchanges, and sort of shared resources, shared finances with other people. So this could be a part of that story as well. And the North Node, which is what is blocking out this moon in your seventh house, is in the sixth house of your work and your obligations and the day-to-day struggle or the day-to-day efforts that you need to make. So whatever this relationship change is, or this new awareness around relationship, it's going to take you to a different place in the day-to-day, maybe a different role. And again, that might be especially true if this is about a client relationship or a business one that is coming to an end. And you're now moving from that thing, you're moving away from this notion of that's what I needed up until this point, and now I need something different. And that North Node is saying, yes, and that will change your everyday life. That will change how you work. That will change your health. That will change your day-to-day schedule. All of those different aspects will be different. Um, your ruler is being reborn, as I said, for the next 3 months. So as Mercury comes out of the heart of the sun in your first house of self, there's an awareness that may still be hidden in terms of your own goals or what it is that you want to achieve, in terms of how you want to deal with that or manifest that. But it's also beginning a cycle that suggests that you've got to focus on yourself at this time. And then by the end of this shorter Mercury cycle of 3 months, you get to the Mercury retrograde phase, which is late October, like 24th of October till the 13th of November. And by the end of November, or early December, I guess it is, when Mercury leaves your third house, you will have a notion of what to do with all this, because it's the third house, which is about what now to do practically. And so think in terms of yourself at this point, not necessarily needing to know the how, and try to find the practicalities. Now, Mars rules your house of the practicalities and what to do and how to use your willpower. And it's up here in the 11th house of your future. It's also in the area of your friends groups, or social groups or networks, and also the house of the earnings or the big gains of what you earned from what you do. And Mars also, of course, rules that Saturn and Neptune there in your eighth house as well. But this is where you might have a notion of what it is that you want to gain or how you want to go forward in terms of your vision for your future. And then the Mars will set you up later as Mercury goes into that retrograde phase, um, where it's going to show you the practicalities of what Mars is trying to point to right now. And don't forget that Mars is going to be retrograding in between your house of self starting in January. So you're going to have Mars in December in your house of self. And from the 10th of January, Mars is retrograding at 10 degrees back into your 12th house. So this is part of this bigger theme for you, very personal to you. I'll be doing separate videos on that because it's a lot to put into one. But yeah, all of this to say, point to these things, but from a place of understanding yourself and the dynamic that you need to get to where you want to go. There's something that's done that you're aware now of something. And I mean, when I say done, it doesn't mean you have to leave somebody. It can be like, well, we've been dating for so long, and now it's time to get married. So in that sense, that part of that relationship is done and you move into the next thing. Or it could quite literally be, we've been married for so long and I can't do this anymore and it's time to get divorced. Whatever it is, it's changing your social status, because here we find Uranus up in the 10th house, and this is part of a big T-square, which is changing your social status. It's a very big deal for you, whatever this is all about. I think it's going to be a major turning point in terms of your career, but also where you get to with Uranus in the 10th house. This is where you really get to this place of finding yourself as an expression of what you do. And all the more so because Uranus is ruled by Mercury, which is there also your ruler, and it's squaring this Uranus at the same time as this eclipse. So this is huge. It's pretty big. Especially with that notion of my day-to-day life is going to be changing. Really big deal. Jupiter is in the 12th, very constructive. Jupiter rules the 11th house, and that can be very, very helpful here in terms of your vision, your spiritual or intimate vision of yourself, your dreams, where you're getting this kind of inspiration from. Very inspiring. And Jupiter South Node in the 12th, K2 is a very spiritual planet. Well, the planet, it's a point in the sky, the South Node, but it's a spiritual placement. And so you're really looking at something from a completely different point of view. And of course, the opposite end of that is what to do about it and how my everyday life is going to change. Now, finally, Venus is in your second house, and she's very fortunate here in the second. That's good for harmonious relationships with family. It's beautiful for your abundance or your feeling of abundance or a feeling of capacity around that. That abundance can, again, remember that people can sit on mountains of money and never feel abundant. It's really important to understand that abundance is not about how much you have, it's how you relate to what you have. And this is a very good time for this, for feeling abundant and to really act from that place. And when you feel abundant, things tend to come together in a very harmonious way. So it's a beautiful blessing. And Venus is visible, Jupiter is visible right now. It's far enough away from the sun. You see that now we can see Jupiter early in the morning. We see Venus in the early evening when you look outside. So there we are. Or is it the other way around? No, Venus is the morning star, I think. Oh, I can't remember now. Sorry, I think I've got it wrong. But anyway, no, I think I had it right. I should never correct myself. Anyway, I will correct it in the notes if I got it wrong. I will see you in the next video. Bye, Virgo. So Libra, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, we have this eclipse happening in your sixth house of everyday work, and that's where also obstacles come across or things that you have to sort out, stuff that you have to do every day. You've had Saturn here for a long time, so you remember all that stuff, and Neptune even longer. So I spoke to you quite a lot about these different topics in the last several years, and now there's something that you realize it's time to let go. So you might want to look back on those cycles of Saturn and Neptune and recognize where there was this big focus for a long time on either illness or day-to-day work and stuff that you just had to do, or where you were being there for other people, but not necessarily getting your just desserts and being reciprocated in some way. And this would be the opportunity for you to look at that and say, especially over the last year and a half, what am I realizing that now I need to let go, or I'm realizing that now needs to be done differently? So it's a great opportunity for you to see how your everyday life can transform. And you, on top of that, have the exaltation ruler of Pisces, which is where this lunation is happening in your sign. It's your ruler, Venus. And that's beautiful. So you've had Venus in your sign since the 7th of October, and she stays there quite a long time. So she'll be there in until the 10th of September, and then retrograding from your second house of money back into your house, and then she'll station just almost at 23 degrees, 2250 or something like that. So Venus is very close to this place that she will be stationing all the way forward into November, no, 14th, I think, 13th or 14th of November. So that's your ruler, and it's a big story for now. I'll do a whole separate video on the Venus retrograde cycle because it's a big deal, and especially as your ruler, it's a very big deal. But it does light you up in so many beautiful ways at the time of this eclipse, which is showing you something about your everyday story that you're no longer either aligned with or that you're really just clear. It's not okay. I'm moving on from this. I'm realizing this is finished. And that doesn't have to be in a negative way at all. I'm saying this in a very stark way, but it can also be a realization like, yay, well done. I've done the thing. Now I've done this thing. What's next? What's the next project? And there will be many, many next projects for you because we're looking at a lot of focus on the future. We've got Jupiter here in the 11th house, kind of reshaping your sense of what the future looks like for you and how you want that to feel. And then on top of that, you've got the in the fifth house for you, the North Node, which is part of this eclipse. The Rahu eclipse is the North Node eclipse on the moon. And that's in your fifth house, rather, of self-expression and what you want, what you love, what you're passionate about right now, and how you want to express that. This can be something that you're recognizing is different in your day-to-day because of work or because of a realization around how you want to feel day-to-day in a different way. But it can also be that you're recognizing there's a new way that you need to stand up and show up, maybe even around children, having children. Deciding this is yes or no around children. Maybe there's something about your children, if you already have them, that you're having to do differently. And that's also a big period of transformation for you. And because Jupiter is up there in the 11th house and it's the ruler of the sixth house, we can tie these two houses together in a very helpful way. But also, Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of your 10th house. So we're looking at not only the sixth house of work, also your everyday life and how that feels and how you're managing those things. Even if there's a health issue, what that might be and how you're managing that or how you're releasing that, letting go of that is another potential around that, or a health and diet sort of regime that you're letting go. And the Jupiter in the future, in the house of your vision for your life and the direction that you want to take, and the Jupiter as an exaltation ruler of this Mars, which itself in Cancer is ruled by this moon. So these three houses are tied in, and Mars is in the 10th house of ambition, career, your sense of your personal drive and ambition, motivation, your reputation, how you want to stand up and do something now. And certainly it's got you thinking a lot about those things. And Venus is super helpful for you at this time as a not only the ruler of your first house, but also the ruler of your eighth house of shared resources and intimacy and marriage. Um, Mars also from the 10th house is ruling Saturn. It's a square to Saturn at this point, increasing in exactitude until the end of the month. And that could be that there's something here about your marital status, your relationship status that's part of this bigger change. But because Jupiter is also trinal to Saturn, it actually looks like something that you're ready to deal with. You're ready to do some forward planning on. So while there may be some kind of tension or a feeling of maybe an emotional trigger around something or a feeling of frustration that's building in some way around your destiny, around your job, your purpose in your social life and social status and so on. There is this thing that says, wait, slow it down and take this seriously, or take the person that you're with seriously, and sort it out in a way that's durable, long term. So that's quite constructive in many ways, even if there looks like there's going to be a hiccup at the same time. So these things are happening almost simultaneously, or at least basically within a couple of days of each other in terms of the precision of the aspect. But for me, it's really the whole last week of August and the first week of September that we're looking at. Um, Equally with the moon in opposition to this sun, getting the light from the sun, but then getting it blocked out by the north node, we also have a new phase that's coming through the cycle of Mercury and the sun. And Mercury is coming just out of the heart of the sun in your 12th house. This can be foreign lands. This can be foreigners. It can be also all the more so a big moment of new change or a new plan or a new vision for all of those things, because there's a square coming to Uranus from the lunation as well as from Mercury that is ruling Uranus in your ninth. And a lot of this energy is taking you out into the world. You see, there's a lot of this energy that is suggesting that there's something that your focus is on you showing up out in the world at this time, and your vision for how that should shape up or what your life feels like. This can also be a shakeup in your spiritual life or your faith, 12th and ninth houses both represent those things. There may be a recognition of something that you realize is not quite what you thought it was, and this can also be the realization aspect of the moon, where you're looking at things from a perspective of more grounded reality in that sixth house way. It's like, I need to deal with this. I need to look at this thing. I'm seeing it now, maybe with fresh eyes or for the first time. Um, Equally, because of that Uranus ninth house, and part of that change could be around changing work because I'm having to move, or I'm having to move because I'm changing work. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be difficult on some levels, but otherwise quite constructive on many others. And I say that specifically because your ruler Venus is not only visible, but in your first house of self for such a long time in the next 4 months, but also um, Jupiter is visible and in your 11th house of good fortune and the future and possibilities and your dreams and visions for the future. And there's a lot that you can work with here if you're willing to kind of stretch yourself a little bit and say, okay, maybe I need to really change in a geographic sense. I need to make a big difference, a big change in my life, maybe structurally or relationally or geographically, in order to get where I need to go and for that to show up in my new way of showing up every day. So for some of you, that will be a real blessing, and for others, this will be just simply more of an internal sense of change, more of a sense of, okay, I recognize this has to change now. It needs to be done differently. The Mercury Sun story, the Cazimi here, that is just emerging at the time of the eclipse, is where and you'll hear more about that in the intro, but there you're going to see the continuation of that Mercury story with the sun after 3 months when Mercury comes back into the heart of the sun in the retrograde phase. And that will be in your second house of money and values and your family as well. And everything that ties into in terms of how you make your living, how you deal with property, how you're dealing with your belongings, your possessions, and all the resources that you have. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of things that are maybe hidden from you, or things that you're not really quite clear on, or that are not yet revealed to you, there's going to be something very clarifying as we get into October, November during the Mercury retrograde cycle. And especially because it ties into the Venus retrograde cycle, which is hugely important for you as your ruler. And I will be doing a separate video with Julia Simas on that. We'll be talking about the whole story of the Venus cycle, but also I'll do the sign by sign as we go forward. I think that's it, Libra. It's not like it's not a big deal. It's a big deal, but it just is enough for this moment. Do listen to the introduction if you haven't already, and I will be coming back again and again to talk more about this wonderful Venus star point in your second house of money. And I will look forward to talking to you again then. Bye for now. Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This is a trinal eclipse now. So the lunar eclipse is in your fifth house of self, your self-expression, not self, rather self-expression, how you express who you are, how you express yourself, how you reach out into the display, let's say, of who you are. How you express love as well, how you express your creativity, your children, whatever you create is there in the fifth house. Projects of all kinds. So that can be creative projects, literally from a human being all the way to a work of art or an entrepreneurial project like a business. And all of those things are coming to a point of realization. And if this is about whether it's love or a project that you're working on or something to do with your children, it feels like it's come to this point and it's not going to go any further. And you get it now. There's something that you realize about this time, and you're looking at that with a sense of, okay, what's next now? There's something I'm moving away from. The cycle is coming to a close. And I'm realizing this aspect of it. And all those dates are given to you in the description below this video, but also in the introduction of the video with the details around the eclipse. And the fact that this is trinal to you suggests that it's quite a harmonious change. And the other aspect of that is that the moon is starting to trine your ruler, Mars, and then Mars itself is trinal to you. So Mars is in the moon's sign, and it's trining you and the moon at the time of the eclipse, or just hours after that. And so you have a favorable opportunity here to make a change based on something that feels really purposeful, really important to you as a person. And with Jupiter at the top of your chart, it's all the more favorable for a bigger sense of your new position in life, or your new, let's say, social role, or your new way of showing up. Notice that the South Node is with that Jupiter, so whatever was happening up until this time is also a bigger part of this change. And that I've done a separate video on both the Jupiter in your 10th house as well as the South Node moving through the 10th house in Leo. And you will have a lot more from those videos, but in a nutshell, there's something that is changing in all different dynamics that include maybe your relational dynamics or relationship changes, status changes, work changes, and especially as Saturn and Neptune are both in your sixth, this will be work in terms of the day to day. This is literally like, am I employed? Am I not employed? Am I retiring? Am I deciding to take on my own project? Is my heart no longer in my work? This would be a question in terms of the moon, for example. Is my heart no longer in it? Would be the question also around relationships. And here what we have is a square from the lunation. It's what we call a T-square to Uranus. And as the moon and sun and Mercury are squaring Uranus, and Mercury rules that Uranus, from this place of a vision for your future and the place of how do I express myself through that, or through the things that I love and I'm passionate about, Uranus in the eighth house of your intimacy, of other people's values, pardon me, of other people's money, other people's what they contribute to you or what you might receive from them. It's shaking things up in a dramatic way here. And so you might realize actually quite suddenly that what you thought was a partnership or a team or a project with work is just no longer really there for you anymore. Or you're recognizing that it's just changing so much that something needs to give, something needs to, yeah, be modified. And equally, this can also be around social status loss. And if you think about it in terms of the South Node in the 10th house for Scorpio rising, particularly, but also 10 houses from Scorpio, Sun or Moon, there can be a sense of, well, this is no longer who people see me as. So I'm not in that role to them anymore. And that doesn't have to mean anything to do with shame necessarily. It may do, but it can also be that I'm just no longer who people used to associate me as. And so more of your attention at the time of this eclipse is being called into what you need now to feel secure emotionally, what grounds you, how you can kind of hunker down and have that sense of what you need to feel stability in your life. And that's the North Node in the fourth house. Um, and here what we have as well is this combination between the fifth house and the fourth house of your love or your passion or your self-expression, of the way that you express what you create or how you create. And then the North Node in the fourth house saying, if my heart's not in it, it's not where I'm supposed to put my attention, because the fourth house also represents what makes me happy. So these are working really strongly hand in hand here. Now, Jupiter is also in a trine to Saturn from your 10th house to the sixth house. Saturn is retrograding through there, so it's already been there since the middle of 2025, but it's retrograding now back through where it came from in April. And Jupiter itself is in new territory as it's moving forward in this cycle that began in 2020. And again, it has to do with work or the things that you establish in a concrete way around your income, your money, your resources, and your employment, or the way that you set yourself up every day. And again, potentially around status things. Um, when I say status, I'm not, it can be a social status in terms of like whatever, high, low, X number of followers, those kinds of things. But especially, am I married? Am I not married? Am I employed? Am I not employed? Am I single? Am I divorced? Whatever, all those different things are what we call social status. And there's a lot of reference to that right now. And there's also going to be, with your ruler Mars, a lot of attention there, because Mars will spend a lot of time in Leo, starting at the end of September and going right through until next June, between Leo in your 10th and Virgo in your 11th house. So you've got a lot of focus here on that whole question. So what you're looking at in the fifth house is an opportunity to see yourself in this new role and to look at this from the long-term perspective. Is this working for me? Is it working for my health? Is it working for my day to day? And then finally, Venus is in your 12th house. There are worse things that could happen. Venus in the 12th can also be around hidden relationships, hidden motivations. Also, just kind of hunkering down in a way that makes you feel more secure, backtracking, coming into a place that feels more comfortable for you, or being clear also about relationships and anything that may not be clear or may need clarifying. Now, Venus in the 12th can also represent foreigners, foreign lands, and harmony in terms of your own inner experience of self, like your unconscious or your dream state. It's not really problematic having Venus there by transit. It's actually quite beneficial. But the fact that also there is this preparation for retrograde, which will happen in your first house, means that it's a good idea from now on to really pay attention to what this represents for you in terms of the Venus in the 12th, because she'll be going from your first house all the way back into the 12th, and that will be the better part of the rest of this year until December. So, or even until the very beginning of January. So you've got a lot to work with there. And Venus rules your relationship sector. So if there is anything going on that feels secretive or hidden or something difficult to divulge, not necessarily for bad reasons, but just because it's not the time or something, or whatever it is that's happening, this would be the time to make that clear. And then through the retrograde cycle, that will be dealt with, it will be revealed, or it will be clarified one way or another. So all of it is happening in a very significant way for you, supportive change and a vision for what makes you happy and what it is that you want to do going forward. Okay, Scorpio, I'll be back to talk about that Venus retrograde cycle, which will impact you really powerfully very, very soon. Talk to them. Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Jupiter, your ruler, of course, trinal to you for a long time now, for over a year, that Jupiter will be there favoring you from the ninth house, and it's in a trine to Saturn at the time of this eclipse. So there's something really helpful about this particular eclipse energy, which itself is happening in your house of your home and the other Jupiter-ruled sign of Pisces, home, but also property or family or lineage, your internal home, you, especially with the moon there representing your emotional life, your psychological nature, how you feel about everything, how you're feeling about your own self. Are you being true to yourself? So listen again to the introduction to hear all of that, especially with Fomalhaut there, and the recognition of your deepest sense of what your gut is trying to tell you in a powerful way, and which direction it's trying to point you to. And we see that the opposite side of this is the sun with Mercury having just emerged from the heart of the sun, from its Cazimi phase. And there's something that is telling you what is the story now. There's a new story about your work, around your career, around this maybe potentially relationship status or the social status that you're carrying at this time. And your heart is telling you what you need to know about that, what is true to you. It's in a square. This is a T-square, very powerful between the sun and the moon in opposition, as well as Mercury, which is ruling your house of relationship, where we find uh, the square to Uranus. So there's some big changes going on right specifically at this time that are highlighting the notion of relationships, employment contracts, issues to do with, because the North Node is in the third house, which is contractual stuff, issues to do with willpower and choice. And this is a North Node eclipse, so it's really about tying in that fourth house feeling of security, or your emotional kind of gut feeling around things, or the feeling of where you need to be physically in the world. And then that North Node in the third house saying, okay, that we've got to do something pragmatic about this. We need to take some kind of action based on this. And it has a lot to do with the changing state of you in relationship, you in partnership, you in, again, employment, or is it employment, or is it self-employment? Am I unemployed? Am I retiring? All these different changes are coming through these main houses, these backbone houses of your chart, what we call the angles of the chart. So something quite significant at this time of the eclipse for you that could be real surprise coming through another person or coming through the way you realize something about yourself in relationship. And again, in relationship to you as much as anything, because in the fourth house, it's very private. It has a lot to do with, just again, as I mentioned, your feelings. How do I feel about things? This could even be as literal as your mother, the fourth house representing that, your home and sort of roots of the chart, and the moon representing mother as well. Mars is in the eighth house right now, and it's just after the eclipse, it's going to get a trine from the moon, from the fourth to the eighth, and these are considered mute houses, and Mars is ruling also the 12th house from there. Pardon me, and they are pointing a way for you to listen deeper into your intuition, into your psyche, um, also into your intimacy with other people. Is there something that needs to change around that too? Is there something that you're ready to let go of? Mars is in a square to this Saturn, so your ruler is trining Saturn, and Mars is squaring Saturn in the days following this eclipse. It's building up to that at the eclipse, so it's already active, but it becomes exact in the days after this eclipse. So there's something here about your fifth house that kind of again says, I'm not really sure about this thing, how to express this part of myself or how to express the thing that I like to do. And maybe you're feeling a little bit shy around that, or maybe feeling like it's hard to know, is this the right thing for me right now? In some way, you're going to get provoked into recognizing it. It doesn't mean you have to take action on it, but there's something that's going to trigger your awareness at this time, or an event around you that then sets it up for change to happen. Because of Mars in a square to Saturn, and it's ruling Saturn, rules your fifth house from the eighth house, is saying that there's something that I'm now ready to deal with. I need to do something about it. But Saturn, as it's retrograding, is saying we're going to recover the territory that we already had from April until now. And you're looking at all of that as you're thinking, okay, now I can't do this anymore. I need to change this. So you do have a lovely Venus in the 11th house, which is very helpful for social connections, for support from friends. Um, Venus also rules your sixth house of work, as well as the 11th house of your friends and future and so on. And we've got Chiron there in your sixth house of work, which also could represent health or illness of some kind or the day-to-day stuff. And again, there may be this sense of, okay, I've got a lot of ideas or a lot of support coming from other people, from friends, or from a sense of harmony around maybe feeling at peace with the future for yourself. And yet I still don't know quite how that's going to work out. So just take your time, because Venus herself is also going to be going back and forth between your 12th house and your 11th house in her retrograde phase. I'll come back and do a separate video about that. And then because Jupiter is still direct until the 13th of December, I would say, especially as a Sagittarius rising, if you really start to feel things moving in the right direction, or you're really getting ideas and you want to go there, just go. It's great. Just keep going. And you might have to come back and make adjustments, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. But be guided by your guts, be guided by the thing that says this just doesn't feel right for me, or this feels fantastic, and this is the direction that I want to go in, and this is what I need right now. I feel it in my bones, I feel it in my heart. This is what I need right now. And that even could literally represent a property, a new place to live, for example. So good luck with all of these different things, Sag, and I will talk to you again in the next video. Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Well, your ruler is still lurking in the fourth house, and it's now retrograding in a trine. It's being trined by Jupiter in your eighth house. So there's a lot going on that feels quite behind the scenes. And there may be something that this moon is showing you in terms of how you're needing to communicate what is coming through much more intimate or private parts of your life. And the moon in the third house is really a point of choosing. It's a choice that might feel like it's an emotional one, or it's a choice that might feel like it's based on your kind of gut reaction to things, or a sense of, needing to uh, just needing to reveal what is true for you, whether this be about friendship or a sibling or about your community. or even in a general sense about your creative expression. This the third house energy is very, very creative for Capricorn. And then having that sense at this particular point with Jupiter ruling this moon from your eighth house, that there's something here you're maybe ready to look at that you weren't really ready to take action on before. The third house is about taking action. It's about doing something, also communicating around that. And so in many ways, you've got that Jupiter in the eighth showing you, okay, I see this now. I see this very clearly from my intimate life or from what I share in marriage or the money that I'm sharing with other people. So Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of your seventh house. And it can be very favorable in those things. It can be extremely favorable. You're getting now maybe resources, or even if it's only moral and emotional support from your partnerships or your marriage partner, or from family, from inheritance, for example. These kinds of things can be very favorable to you. And the moon in the third house is saying, well, what next now? What do I do about that? Because there's a realization in that third house way, which is very pragmatic. It's about what to do next. What's the practical choice here? How do I express it, communicate it? Where do I sign? This is contractual stuff as well, the third house. So if there's something that is coming up in a contractual way, that is also reflected here by the Mars in the seventh, where there may be some need to step in and do something to recalibrate a relationship, or the square from Uranus, or rather from the lunation to Uranus, from Mercury in your ninth to Uranus in your sixth house, that is saying, okay, now something needs to be established or dealt with, let's say, or let go of, so I can create this new space in terms of my everyday life, which was changing rapidly with Uranus in your sixth house. Mercury Sun in your ninth house is part of this eclipse. It's the sun that's giving the light to the moon, but then the moon is overshadowed by Rahu, the north node, in your second house. And so that we're tying in then the ninth house, the third house, and the second house in a really powerful way at this particular eclipse, because we're looking at the north node end of the eclipse where the moon is, that is being eclipsed. The new thing is the second house relationship, either with family or with your values or with literal money and possessions and the things that you have as resources, including yourself as a resource. So there's a lot here that you could reimagine around your what are those needs, and are they expressed through that third house way? The second house also ties in to the vocal aspects of the expression or way of sharing things. The second house is your voice. In many ways, it's like finding your voice. Second house is literally the jaw, the neck, the throat, the voice, and so on, the timbre of your voice. And then the third house is the communication. It's the stuff you're saying. It's the way that you're saying it. It's how you present. This is one of the ways we know, for example, the Capricorns tend not to be highly communicative because Pisces is there and it tends just not to show up. But anyway, so that's another thing you can learn in this course that I've just posted about how to understand the zodiac. And so what we find here is that maybe you're recognizing something here. It's about finding your voice. And that can be very personal to you. And that would change how that would, restructure your whole relationship to your everyday, to your work potentially, as well as your inner experience of security, your relationship dynamic in some way, around family, around lineage, and so on. Are you finding your voice? Are you finding what you might describe as authentic voice? Rather than, being kind of social and on the surface of things, but can I be deep and authentic in the way that I'm communicating and saying what I have to say? The third house is family, extended family, siblings, cousins, brothers, sisters, etc. And this could also be a revelation around all of those things. So there may be something in that aspect that is actually on their side. Something's happening on their side, and you're realizing something about them. It's not even directly necessarily related to you, although I suspect if you especially have anything in these first sort of 5 to 6 degrees of pretty much any sign, that this is going to be impacting you one way or another. Now, Venus is also really supportive at the top of your chart in your 10th house of your career. And here, what we're looking at is favorable attitudes from bosses, from administration, from your own path, in fact, and your own capacity to be a boss or to be somebody as a role model or somebody that other people look up to. A very favorable time to have all of those different occurrences. She's in a bit of a squidgy relationship here, what's called a a sesqui square with Uranus. So from your 10th to your 6th house, even though by sign they are trining, they're a sesqui square, which means a square and a half, and they don't really connect in an easy way. So the energy is familiar, because it's both air signs, but it's not easy. And what that represents then is a need for you to let things kind of settle, figure it out before recognizing what's the next stage. And one way or another, Venus is adding a lot of grace to the whole pattern, and Venus will be coming back through here, not quite at this degree, but almost 23 degrees of your 10th house as she comes back through the retrograde cycle, which is coming up now from October through November. And a very significant time for you to be recognizing different aspects of your career and um, your ambition, your personal ambition and drive, and so on. So Mercury, which is starting out now in the heart of the sun at the time of this eclipse, is also going to be retrograding along with Venus, and both are doing that in your 11th house of the future. And this is in many ways the beginning of that cycle, of the retrogradation cycle for both of those planets. It's not necessarily, strictly speaking, the beginning for Venus, because she jumped in on the 7th of August into the 10th house. But certainly, this is the rebirth of Mercury here, in terms of the cycle that's coming down the road 3 months from now, which both of them will end on the 13th of November. So you can think of this as a very, very much about looking at your purpose through that Mercury lens, looking at that sense of, am I being open and honest? Am I speaking from the heart? Am I saying the thing that I need to say? Or what changes do I need to make in terms of how I decide things or how I use my either decisive action or willpower? And how do I want to move forward in the future, especially how that will show up for me in November. Equally, the third and the ninth house are both travel houses as well as teaching houses. So you might find that for work or for your everyday health, your focus on the health that might be changing as part of your everyday change, that you might decide it's time to travel. I need to go somewhere else. I haven't found what I'm looking for, and this quest that the Sun and Mercury may be beginning here would be part of that journey of the next few months. So I think that's, oh, and your exaltation ruler Mars, by the way, here in your house of relating, in your house of relationship and squaring your Saturn, this I think is actually quite favorable for Capricorn in general because it's your exaltation ruler, even though it's in exile, even though it's, or rather in fall. It doesn't feel comfortable in Cancer, so you might find yourself either on the receiving end of a lot of emotionality or on the giving end of a lot of emotionality. And if that's the case, then come right back to this question and say, am I expressing myself in a sincere way? Am I actually seeing clearly what I feel? Am I being true, basically, to the choices that I'm making? Or am I making choices and then feeling like a victim around that? And remember from the introduction that that's just not okay any longer. Okay, Capricorn, I'll see you in the next video. And of course, we've got we've got Aquarius on the first house, you and your North Node, piling in there with Pluto. And this lunation is happening on that North Node, but in your second house of money and your resources and family and what gives you support, what brings you a sense of support and being cared for or being secure enough. And we've got this lunation showing you your values and what you value in a general sense. What are your possessions and how do you deal with those possessions? What value do you bring to the world in a general sense? Because also the moon rules your sixth house of your work and how you show up in a helpful way. Um, how you are there in your humanitarian role, Aquarius. That's what gives you your humanitarian role is indeed Cancer on the sixth house. You have to thank Cancer for that, because that's you helping out, you wanting to be there for other people, and reach out to other people when you feel like it, because sometimes you don't feel like it. That's the other part of Cancer. And and here what we have is that moon ruling that from the second house, and then Jupiter ruling the moon from your seventh house of relationships. So there's some aspect of the tie-in, and Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of your sixth. So there's a tie-in here of your first house of self, the second house of money, and your sixth house of work, along with the Jupiter here in the house of relationship. And all of these things are being pulled together. These strands are being pulled together. And what you might be exploring is your sense of value around business partnerships, marital partnerships. Are you with the right clients? Are you with the right partner? Uh, is this the right pattern with relationships as a concept in a general sense? Of course, that's something I've mentioned already in many videos because of the Jupiter and South Node going through there. And you'll find those videos already on my channel. But the fact that the moon is being eclipsed in your second house suggests that there's an aspect of money or your sense of your contribution or your self-worth or what you might feel supported and guided by that is being eclipsed. It's the end of something. It's not only a full moon, but it's a lunar eclipse, and it's saying, okay, I'm seeing something now. It's not happening anymore. It isn't that anymore. Um, the second house again references whatever supports you, including potentially food. And as the moon rules your sixth house of your everyday sort of habits and health habits and things like that, you may be realizing something really practical about food. It could be, is it that this food is bad for me, or is it that I'm having an emotional response to food? I'm not behaving in a healthy way around food or other substances, because it's whatever you consume, whatever type of substances you consume. And and then of course your ruler is Saturn, and it's in the third house. And there's something here also specific to that Mars in your sixth house being squared by Saturn, or rather Mars squaring Saturn. And there can be something that makes you feel like there's a limitation around what options you have available or what choices you have available, or a feeling of being a little isolated in your family or in your community, and you're recognizing patterns of isolation. By the way, that's a theme for Aquarius. That's not like a brand new story. That is an Aquarian theme. Marginalization, isolation, need for freedom, and not wanting to be free. All those different things are the Aquarian story, and you can learn more about those things in my courses. But but here it's very literal, it's very specific. And is it about also is it your health care? Is it the way you're behaving and therefore you're isolating from your family? Is it the way that you're dealing with people from your lineage or from your family that is a problem to them or a problem to you, whatever that is? Saturn rules your 12th house of self-undoing. Um, and it also, of course, is your own ruler. So it's something to notice as well. What's the choice? Are you making the right choice based on yourself? Go back to April for this bigger question of Saturn to try and understand, what was it? And also, especially because in April we had Mars in a conjunction with Saturn. Now they're a square. I'll be talking about these things later as we go through the next 10 days, because it'll come up again. So this is the opening square cycle of that connection in April that was there when Mars and Saturn met. But favorable in a different way is the support that you're getting or that you're realizing coming from relationships, or an awareness of the best thing to do about a relationship, even if it means letting go of one. There's something that looks like it looks like a plan. It looks like something that's going to work out for you. And Jupiter rules your house of the future as well as the house of money. So the 11th house also is a money house, but from the sense of gains, what you gain from what you do, not necessarily employment income, but rather like if you're a business owner, or it's a reputational gain, or it's some kind of social accolade or something like that, is possible. But it's in a trine to Saturn from the seventh house of your way of relating, or to actual people that you relate to. This might be a spouse, for example, or some kind of business partnership, and it's supporting you over the long haul. And as I said um, in the introduction to this video, there's a longer arc of time that we need to wait through the three different times that Jupiter and Saturn are going to be trining until they finally trine in July, on the 11th of July in 2027. And that's when you're going to get more of an answer for yourself. So definitely focus on how that all looks to you as you go forward into the middle of 2027. You're setting the seeds for that bigger shift, or the sense of support, or the sense of a bigger vision for something that is also a social restructuring in some way. Venus is very helpful to you right now in the top of your chart, in the ninth house of your sense of purpose, what you want to understand and learn, how you might want to communicate and teach that. Now, this is also Saturn in the third, that you can also work with that. Do I teach? Do I want to communicate something? How do I structure all of that? And Venus is adding a very harmonious aspect to that. So it's maybe meeting a foreigner, or meeting somebody who comes from a higher minded collaboration. Conferences are in the ninth house. So there maybe you meet somebody in a conference, and especially because Mars is in your sixth house of work and it rules your 10th house of career. If there's some work-related thing, that could be literally that. A relationship establishes itself based on some kind of conference or work due that you attend, or that you have to travel for work, and therefore you meet somebody that can be very favorable. It doesn't necessarily mean a romantic partner, but somebody favorable, a friend, or somebody who's helpful, or somebody who links you with somebody else in that very, very Libra Venusian way. And of course, Venus is going to be retrograding soon. In the pattern of the retrograde, she'll slow down as we get into September. A few days after this eclipse, Venus is going to be slowing down to the point of her shadow, where she'll come back to in the middle of November, after having gone into your 10th house and then back into the ninth house. So between the time that she had entered into your ninth house in a trine to you on the 7th of August, until she finally leaves your 10th house of career and your personal ambition and so on, that's going to be a big long cycle that takes you into early January. So this whole thing, what you're establishing here right now, has a lot to do with forecasting how you're going forward into even the next year. And of course, then the eclipse cycle starts all over again as we get into February. So, and you're on the hot seat. You're there, as we know. And of course, the North Node is close to that point of where we had the eclipse on the 17th of February. So for some of you, that was, very much connected to your birthday time, if you have a sun there. And otherwise, if you have the last, say, 5 degrees of Aquarius, that will have been a very impactful new moon for you around that time. And the North Node is coming close to that point. Finally, your modern ruler is Uranus, and it's Uranus that is squaring this eclipse. It's squaring its ruler, which is in the eighth house, under the beams of the sun, and this is something that is being revealed to you from either the house of, again, marriage, other people's money, or what you share with other people, or secrets and things that are being revealed. And then Uranus in the fifth house can represent, again, notions of love, change of heart around love, or a change of pattern of behaving, a revelation of sorts. In some cases, for example, for some of you, this could be that you recognize either a person that you're in love with, or a relationship that doesn't pan out anymore and you're getting it, or it's an actual recognition of a way of loving, and that can include your sexuality. And so there can be something that allows you to say, I need to talk about this. I need to make this real. This is the Jupiter trine to Saturn. I need to bring myself out of the closet in that very literal way, based on my values. This is the moon in the second house. And again, if it's not necessarily a sexuality issue, it's about a love thing, or about a creative dynamic, or even on a very simple, basic level, it can be around a financial thing. And you're needing to make it clear, and you're needing to state your case, and you're needing to you recognize what's available to you based on your own values, your own resources, and the things that you're bringing to the table yourself. And again, that will apply to some of you, and of course, not at all to others. This is not a personal chart reading, so I'm just giving you what the chart is telling me without being able to see your personal story. All right, Aquarius, make the most of this. I will be back so many times to talk about you in the future videos because this is your moment in a very big way for quite a long time. All right, bye for now. Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This is your eclipse. This is the last time that Pisces is going to have an eclipse in your sign. In this particular cycle, we're ending out, we're closing out this bigger eclipse phase that has been not only the basically year and a half or so that the nodes were going through your first house, the North Node in your first house, South Node in your seventh, of others and relationships since the 11th of January of 2025 from the true node area, but also the broader cycle of 18 and a half years of the eclipses. It will be another 18 years plus before you get this kind of energy back in your house of self. And this is really a major shift for you. You've learned something here, and the moon is showing you. What have I learned? How have I seen who I am? And it's who I am in the dynamic of the other, with me and the other, me and myself in relationship. The relationship that I bring to the table. This is a really good opportunity to recognize that pattern, as I mentioned in the beginning, in the introduction, around victim martyr dynamics. Where am I playing this game of victim martyr dynamics in such a way that I'm recognizing something about myself now and seeing, no, I want to do this differently now. I'm going to pull back and not play that game. I'm not going to do that thing anymore. I say this myself as a stellium in Pisces, so I'm not trying to put you down. I'm just pointing out. Um, Jupiter, which is the ruler of Pisces, is in the sixth house now, and this is a really significant journey towards a new way of living and a new way of shaping up your life, whether it be like a day-to-day change or a change in terms of your work, literal job, if you have that kind of work. The work that you do day to day, and even if you're working for yourself, you've got the day-to-day stuff that you have to do, the schlepping that you have to do. And Jupiter rules your sixth house of status as well as your house of self. And there's something here that feels like a bit of an obstacle when Jupiter's in the sixth house. It's like, okay, I can do this. There's a capacity, a definite capacity that's there. But also, you're nourishing whatever you're doing in the ways that may not be noticed in that sixth house way of just get down, put the head down and do the thing, pen to paper or just take out the trash or whatever the thing is. It's nourishing your 10th house of your social image or your social status or your social progress or your personal ambition, career, work, and all that kind of thing that people do actually see. So you're nourishing all that, but behind the scenes in so many ways. And part of this realization around the relationship story can be about business partners as much as relational partners. So this can be a bigger part of the theme of this moment in time. Mercury is coming out of the beams of the sun in your house of relationship. So there's a new revelation. There can be something that you're not necessarily seeing clearly or not wanting to see clearly at this time. Um, Especially with Uranus in your fourth house, there can be quite a lot of emotions stirred up or a lot of a feeling of insecurity at this time, if that's the case for you. Especially if a new relationship has come in or if an old relationship is leaving or in some way a new way of working is coming in or an old way of working is leaving. Either way, there's this moment in time where there's a feeling of instability. That it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It feels like it's just the liminal space that you're in right now. And so the lunation, although it's moved on because I keep moving the dial, of course, the lunation was happening on Fomalhaut, so it was less than 5 degrees, and the sun itself was less than 5 degrees at the time of the lunation, which puts it in a really a tight square with Uranus. And there we find this real shape-shifting kind of shock energy of awareness. This can be visceral. It's coming through your fourth house of deep intuition, deep awareness. What do I need to feel secure? I need to change something about myself or about the structure of my life in order to feel secure. And so again, that if we allow ourselves to be sort of battered around by life, we're not actually taking responsibility for things. This Uranus can feel incredibly destabilizing. However, if you are deciding, oh, I know exactly what I need, and it's this particular change, and I need to come more authentically from, that's the Uranian quality there, authentically coming from that fourth house, deep intuition, the gut instinct, the feeling of connection that I have with things that have come before me, including my family lineage and so on. Change in my relationship to my family itself, my children, or my own family structure. All of those things are part of this Uranus in the fourth house that can bring you some deep insight into what it is that needs to be in your awareness at this time, or what you're realizing. You notice and you think, no, that has to change. That isn't working any longer. Or not that it has to be a bad thing, but again, this feeling of I'm done with that. Isn't that great? I'm finished now. It's all good. It's done. I'm moving on. And that's also a realization at that full moon, in that full moon eclipse way. So the North Node is the thing that is eclipsing the moon, and it's in the 12th house now. And that's where we're going to find more than a year and a half of the North Node in for Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. In the 12th house, there's a lot going on that is deeper in the under unconscious, let's say, or the things that are not necessarily clear and understood, or in the more spiritual realms. So this is part of that particular energy, that dynamic of the spirit, or your connection to things that feel a little bit disengaged from the real world, disengaged from reality. Again, that adds to the feeling of um, the South Node that's moving through the sixth house, adds to that quality of change in terms of your day-to-day life and how you structure that. And that can include the work that you're doing, the type of work or the job itself, or the way that you're doing your work, or the way that you're dealing with your health. This can also be where you recognize a pattern of self-undoing that is part of the, as I was mentioning earlier, that potential for the victim martyr dynamic, and feeling like you're somehow not, you have no agency in life. One of the reasons for that with Pisces is because Taurus is on the third house, and it's a very passive sign. Taurus doesn't really take action. And so where the third house is about using willpower and getting stuff done, as long as Pisces commits to something, it can get lots done. But it can also easily put up its hands and say, "Ah, I give up, I'm not doing it." And that's where we get a lot of this victim martyr dynamic. And so what is important to recognize in this is that both Chiron in your third house of choice and willpower and how to express what you need, and also the moon in your first house and the North Node in your 12th house, they're all coming together to say that if you want to do something more, let's say, helpful or more proactive, and not feel like a victim being battered about by other people's decisions or other people's things, you need to do something about it in a different way, and you have to dig into understanding that better. Equally, Saturn in the second, which I've spoken about many times since the middle of 2025, as well as the Neptune in the second, is helping you restructure your sense of your self-worth and your possessions and the things that are worth anything to you. What are your values? All of it changing. And then in the same way, we've got Venus in the eighth house, which is very favorable to a psychological awakening or understanding of intimacy, or an understanding of the dynamics of what the give and take, let's say, of relationships. It's very favorable. None of these things are necessarily bad or difficult for Pisces. Um, and it's this Venus that rules the third house. So there's a lot of deep reflection that is going on for Pisces right now. A lot of things happening very deep under the surface that are going to be coming through an awareness of how you yourself are changing and what you want to do about that. Now, as always, Pisces is a fantastically creative sign, and all of this adds up to that as well. So we have the moon, which represents your fifth house. The moon is the ruler of your fifth, where we find Mars. And Mars is in a square to the second house that it rules, squaring Saturn at the time of this eclipse. And then we find Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, which is also in a trine to Saturn. So from the sixth house of work and what you do every day and how you learn stuff and do stuff in a practical way, to the second house of artistic skill and how you make money, and how you connect with family, and maybe becoming more detached or responsible, independent of family. And again, another way of looking at this is you're putting more of your creative drive into your work, or you're putting more of your creative self into what you do, and you're going to find a new way of working or earning money in your day-to-day life. And that is a fantastic outcome for Pisces at this time. A lot of change in the way that you even conceive of yourself and your role in work or money making. And that is a longer term thing. It's not just this eclipse, but it's the eclipse is triggering that in a very big way. So Saturn and Neptune are making that a bigger deal. And then, of course, Jupiter, your ruler, in the sixth house for sure. And so, what have we not covered? And so, again, the other aspect of this is the square from Mars to Saturn. You may be all gung-ho about certain things, but if you come across a hurdle from Saturn, and if it's a financial one, or if it's a test or a challenge around values, for example, or around family, and what is your commitment around family? Is there a child that you need to look after, or many? Or is there a family story around money or something that you need to do as in terms of supporting the family? Whatever this is, it's a challenge, but it's not a big deal. It's something that is you're being very, very well equipped to deal with this. The moon is just shortly after this eclipse is going to be trining Mars, and you're seeing yourself in this way that says, I see what I need to do here. And that can be emotional expression in your creative output, emotional, uh, relaying an aspect of yourself in that way that I described with Uranus in the fourth, relaying a part of yourself in what you create. Now, if you already have children or you're thinking about children, this can also be coming through them or towards them in terms of what actions you need to take. So there may be something that you need to step into because of your children, or that you're acting upon in order to have children or to take care of their own dynamics. Again, not a negative thing, the way I see it. There may be a momentary feeling of being stuck or being unsure or being blocked by something. I don't see this as a major deal because the longer range story is the Jupiter trining Saturn, and that is an ongoing story that takes us right through till July next year. So whatever's going on here in terms of the long range planning, how to make money, how to change your work, how to show up in a way that you love your job or that you're doing the thing that you really feel expressed through. You're figuring it out between now and then again on the 3rd of April, and then again on the 11th of July when they try and finally both of them direct, and they're like, yeah, okay, we got this. We figured this out. So lots of time to work with all of this stuff, Pisces. No need to rush into it. Your exaltation ruler is Venus, as I said, she's in the eighth house, and you're going to have the retrograde cycle trinal to you from your ninth house of your sense of why am I here? What am I doing with my life? And Venus goes back and forth between those 2 points of the eighth house of your spirit or more psychological or mystical side, the occult stuff as well, and then the ninth house of purpose and what you want, what knowledge you want, or what knowledge you want to disseminate. All of those things are going to be covered with this Venus retrograde cycle, and I will come back and talk about that in a very short time because we're going to talk about the Venus star point with Julia Simas. So definitely listen in for that because Venus is your exaltation ruler, and a very interesting time always when Venus retrogrades, especially trinal to you in a very favorable light, in a very favorable way. So I wish you lots of luck and all the best for your eclipse cycle, Pisces. You won't be bothered by eclipses for a very, very long time to come. Or at least let's say you won't be nudged in this way by eclipses for a very, very long time to come. However, you will have one last eclipse in your house of relationship. That is going to be a full moon where the sun is in your sign and the moon is going to be at 2 degrees. So from 2 degrees to 2 degrees of Pisces to Virgo at the Virgo full moon, and that will be on the 20th of February. So we're still going to be working from this place, this axis of you and the other. And it's all good because you're understanding yourself better now from this eclipse. All right. Good luck, Pisces. I'll see you in the next video.